Okay.
I spilled my
I
coffee.
put this table here so that you could put your
Thank you.
cup on it.
Thank you. Oh, look at all the lights on and everything. Baby's a pro about that. Is everything okay? Should I shave?
No.
I should go with the scruffy look? Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Welcome to Muay Thai Bones. Let's do it again. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Welcome to Muay Thai Bones. Podcast.
Something edition.
Something. I feel bad that we haven't done this for a long time.
Okay, so we just have to say this real quick.
Yeah.
Is that we got a question on Patreon about our newest Muay Thai Bones episode. And we were kind of confused about this because we put up an excerpt. And when we went back and looked at when our last Muay Thai Bones podcast actually was, it was July 20th. And we're like, holy shit.
Which is crazy because we actually, like, every week are like, we should do a Muay Thai Bones. It's been 3 weeks.
Yeah, we're like, it's like how when you say last year, you mean 2019. It's not. It's like that.
So maybe we can chalk this up to COVID time.
Yeah.
Where, like, you get locked into difficult worlds where nothing happens. And you feel like always pressured to go do what you should be doing.
And time is crazy.
And you're like we just did a Muay Thai Library with Arjan Yai. And we try to do them every 3 weeks. And we're like, oh, maybe we should just look and see when the next one's due. And then we're like 2 days ago. So Sylvie busted that out like a superstar, like out of nowhere. I want to say that we thank everybody, especially during this difficult time, of supporting us and following us and encouraging us on. But some of this content, when you produce camera content, is like very arduous work. Like YouTubers talk about this, like people that are on YouTube all the time, is that expressing yourself, drawing yourself out publicly takes an emotional toll in a weird way. Even though we really do I enjoy the Muay Thai Bones podcast, pulling from this stuff is sometimes hard.
Yeah, but there's also that element that's like you wanna make good content.
Yeah.
And so if you're not feeling it, if you're not gonna be able to give it the attention that it really deserves, it's the same thing when I get like a really amazing message and I'm like, I cannot give this the attention I need to give it right now, and so it ends up taking me like 5 days to respond to somebody.
Totally.
And I'm like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I wanted to give this my attention.
Yeah.
But giving it the attention is the important part rather than like it has to go out kind of thing.
Totally. And that's been maybe the reason for this delay, this combination of COVID time and wanting to make something really good. And the subjects in this podcast are really important and huge. So they kind of felt like, to me, they felt like they were like weighing on us, like, you want to do a good job with this. And it also some of them are unfolding in real time, like every
If we'd done it a month ago, it would have been completely different from how it is now.
Yeah, whereas to me it feels much more complicated right now.
Yeah.
So if you're new to the Muay Thai Bones podcast, I'm Kevin, this is Sylvie, 260 fight veteran, woman with the most professional documented fights in any sport that we know of, and I'm her supportive husband and photographer, right?
Yes.
And we do
I need to confirm
we do the Muay Thai Bones podcast. We try to take, these are known as deep dive podcasts, where we try to take on subjects of not only interest to people who are passionate about Muay Thai and the Muay Thai of Thailand. We've been in Thailand now 9 years?
More than, but yeah.
More than 9 years.
Not 10 yet.
9 plus years. And so we take events happening in the Muay Thai of Thailand, but then we try to draw them out into why they're important to our lives and then also to other people's lives. We have people who listen to the Muay Thai Bones that don't even know or care about Muay Thai.
Which is very interesting.
Which is kind of cool. But, so we're going to take a deep dive on a topic, and as I always say, If you're not interested in that, you can jump 30 minutes ahead and there'll be probably something different. Although today we're a little bit themed in our topics.
Yeah.
Towards the end, we'll veer off into something more concrete, maybe.
Yeah.
What else do we know? Oh, I know what I want to say. Do a little commercial here. A couple commercials. One is we've been putting together the Muay Thai Bones newsletter.
Oh,
Remember, right?
I remember. This is something we're doing.
Well, remember we wanted to do this, talk about this. The idea of the Muay Thai Bones newsletter was, well, the idea behind the Muay Thai Bones podcast is we talk about all these topics all week long. Every day we're talking about something about Muay Thai. And we started the Muay Thai Bones thing because we're taking long drives across Thailand to film for the library and for Sylvie to be fighting all over Thailand. And we just started recording in car, and you can go back and see those. We'll hopefully be back in car in the next 6 months or so. But we live the Muay Thai Bones podcast every day, not just in the car. And so we started putting together a newsletter. It comes out every 2 or 3 weeks. But we basically just assemble all the interesting things that are happening in Muay Thai that we note to ourselves and that feed our brains.
Yeah, this is the thing about the Bones podcast and about this newsletter is that this is actually how Kevin and I just talk all day, like all the time. We're talking about these things, what we find interesting, how this like connects to some other thing. And so we're online, as everyone during COVID is, just all the time. But I read Thai. Kevin is on platforms that I don't spend as much time on, so he's seeing content that's kind of different from what I'm seeing. We're a little bit divided. So I'll be looking through something and I'm like, oh, Kevin, this is so interesting, and I'll translate the Thai from him or send him a photo. Or we just discovered that this incredible fighter is the son of Kruchat, who we just filmed for the Muay Thai Library, and it's like this is just fascinating. And so it's like, put it in the newsletter because it's not a Bones episode, but it's part of when we're going through things, like we want to share that this is so interesting.
Yeah, and if you like the Muay Thai Bones and how we think and connect, you'll like the newsletter because that's the like first filter. Not everything gets to the Muay Thai Bones podcast, but this is the like the whale's mouth that all the krill comes in, right?
If you're like us, and we know we are,
What are you talking about?
you'll enjoy the things we enjoy.
Yeah, and sometimes what we do is if we find something interesting, Sylvie or me would write a short article on the Muay Thai Roundtable forum. Mm-hmm. So we kind of like anchor some of these stories with some photos or an explanation on the forum, and then the newsletter will point to that article, or the newsletter will point to original sources. Mm-hmm. It's kind of cool. It is a fair amount of work, but there's no single source like this. There's like Instagram accounts that you can follow with the latest fights and whatnot, but this is like, it's so cool. It's like a whole, as in academic life, passion. Well, I wasn't in academia, but I mean, other than college, but I had maybe a 15-year academic life where I just read academic books in philosophy and sociology. But there were times when I would just it was more interesting to read the footnotes. Mm. Like, have you ever done that on these books? When you just go to the end notes and at a chapter, and some of those writers would just give paragraphs on a certain end note. And there were times when you could just go through the end notes on an essay, and it's more interesting than the essay. Mm. And that's what this kind of reminds me of, is a little bit like the end notes, but not everything got into the podcast. Mm. So that's the first commercial. And then the second commercial is, we've been putting up merchandise on Sylvie's website, which all of the profit goes to. It's 100% nonprofit.
It looks like this. Kevin wears it all the time.
Made me seem like a goober. It's shirts for legends like Diesel Noi.
Yokunpan.
Yes.
Karhat. Putpad Noi.
Putpad Noi. We added one for Putpad Noi. Putpad Noi is in his 70s now. I think he's on a okay fixed income, but every time we send him, his shirts aren't selling. People don't even know who he is these days.
They're not hotcakes.
They're not hotcakes, but every time we sell a shirt and we send him all the profit on our end goes straight to him. Yeah. He's It's a big deal.
It means something. It's a gesture of recognition and appreciation that is not. It's not small. Like, even though it's not a huge amount at the time, it's like this repeated recognition means a lot to
And
them.
for a lot of these men who were great fighters and then had Phuphat Noi kind of like created French Muay Thai.
Totally.
Like they've
like,
been
"I'll just bring this here."
historic men.
Yeah.
At this point in their lives, they're largely forgotten by Thais and their own culture. And so anytime they're recognized, it's a big deal. But Phuphat Noi is one example, but Diesel Noi, his shirts do sell like hotcakes.
Yes.
And we've been able to send him, I don't know, I think it was several $1,000s already.
And that actually really, really helps Diesel Noi. He's not really able to work right now. And every time I send something, he's like, I'm able to pay this bill that I wasn't able to pay.
Totally, he was just like,
deal.
my car's in the shop. My car is in the shop, and I can't even get rid of it because I still owe payments on it.
For 3 years.
For 3
It's so sad.
And his means of life, really.
Yeah.
He's a very social man, and we look at pictures of him now, and we're like, it feels like he's cut off from the coral reef that he likes to move around on and feed him his soul.
Yeah.
And then we just put up, sorry about the long commercial, but we just put up Carhartt's black and yellow gold
they're
short.
so cool. They're so cool.
Baby,
It's amazing for me to geek out
can
this
you go
much
get
about
one?
them because I
Can you
love the pink ones
go
so
get
much.
them real quick?
Well,
Is it too late?
it's
Okay. It's not a big deal.
you can put it in the write up. There will be a link.
Thanks. More work for Kevin. After we film this, I have to do all the footnotes. Passion. They're just gorgeous shorts. They're the pink.
I'll go get them. I know where they are.
I'll start.
It'll
keep
take a
talking.
second.
I'll
Talk.
keep talking about them. They're the pink. The pink shorts that are vintage replica of his 1993 fight with Lam Moon, but a lot of people, and Carhartt himself, wanted them in a different color. So we made a black version of them. And P-Boy, they're made up in Chiang Mai by P-Boy, the Thai Claw. Oh, here she comes. The Thai Claw shop. And they came out so good.
Oh, they're so pretty.
They really are really amazing.
So they're really, really nice. These are nylon, so they dry
Fast drying,
really
yeah.
quickly. They're lightweight, but look at the popping of the color. This is Supawan, that's why the SPW. And then it says Karo and Hot on the side.
Yeah, I don't know why you like to divide his name up like that.
It's on all his shorts.
All of them, yeah,
So it's
totally.
Karo, Hot, and then this was Kevin's idea way back in the day, and we've done this for a long time from my 200 fight shorts.
Yeah.
But we number them. So in order of you ordering them, sorry, baby, I can see you. You have to show that they we number on the
So
back.
you have an individualized number, like a collector type thing, and maybe you'll be
and you
meaningful
have some
to you.
cred at some point. You're like, I'm in the low 20s or
Well,
whatever.
we've sold on 200 fight shorts. All the profits the earned profits go to the Legends and the Crew Fund of the library. We've sold, I think we're up on almost 250 shorts.
Wow.
Of 200 fight shorts, more
More
than
shorts
than you
than the fights.
of those fights.
Of those
you
fights.
still had
I have more
268.
fights.
Okay. Normally we don't do that on the podcast. But you know what? I feel like we should talk about these things a little bit more. But anyways, hats, stuff to help Legends. If you're trying to get it for Christmas for someone or yourself, you probably got to act really quickly because shipping times are wonk.
They're unpredictable.
Yeah.
Not wonk.
Yeah.
They'll get to you.
Okay.
They're just, you don't know what the times are.
Okay, so where are we at? We've got 13
13.
minutes on this thing. Well, let's just start a new segment.
Okay.
Okay.
You have to do 1, 2, 3, go?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, wait, do we?
I don't know. I don't think so.
I don't think so. Okay, so this is the first segment. I have trepidation about this segment.
Well, first say why.
I have trepidation about this segment. One, it's fast moving. It's changing every single week. So next week, it will already be more complicated than it is now.
Yeah.
Second is like, we feel like we're touching at the absolute root and core of a lot of the issues that face women, female Muay Thai in Thailand, and probably the world, but in Thailand in particular. And then 3, you yourself have been emotionally connected to this subject. So I'm like, I want to do it justice. I want to make sure that we're not like speaking negatively about positive changes, like too negatively. But we also want to take a critical stance because that's a lot of what we do. Unfortunately, a lot of female Muay Thai, but also Muay Thai at all, is very cheerleady. Like, and I accept it has to have cheerleaders and passion, and yes, but almost every single thing written or said about a show or a belt or whatever is incredibly shallow. That was a war. That was amazing. That was like just, it's one note. And I understand social media, Instagram, everything is one note, but it just minimizes our perceptions of what's going on. And some of what's going on is really important.
Okay, we'll tell people what we're talking about, like what the actual subject
Did you guess? That was a riddle. Oh man, it feels has so many threads
awesome
to the sweater.
And complicated at the same time.
Sylvie. This has so many threads, I almost feel like the whole podcast is going to end up being this subject matter.
Let's unravel the whole sweater.
Okay, so go ahead. Or you want?
No, I don't introduce things.
Oh, you were like, let's let the cat out of the
I
bag.
commanded you. I said, you tell them what we're talking about.
All right. Okay. So, God, I don't even know how to handle this.
That's right.
Well, it's very
Touchy.
easy to say.
Touchy.
It's very easy to say because it's about the historic reality, and no, it has not yet happened. As we speak, and Thailand is a magical place where you think things are going to happen.
For sure.
For sure.
It's been announced multiple times.
Yeah, but it's not this. In Thailand.
No, I know.
Anything.
Yes, policies,
Anything.
promises, whatever.
Shift. Like,
Last second.
we have so much experience with this also in Muay Thai because that's why one reason we never announce fights that are coming up because things just shift.
Yep.
And you have to just be aware. So even speaking the way we're speaking right now, it's not for sure.
We have this thing where Kevin is like, have you confirmed that fight yet? And I'm like, as much as it can be with them saying, yes, for sure it's happening.
Okay, but this isn't about a particular fight. This is about women fighting in Lumpinee Stadium. In Lumpinee Stadium.
Yeah, so the reason Kevin says it like that is that as it stands, Lumpinee has announced since almost the beginning of the year, maybe even the end of last year, that they were going to start promoting women in their stadium. And then there was a second wave of COVID, everything shut down. This first fight that was supposed to take place between Sanejan and Buakaw, 2 Thai women, was just pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. But to their credit, they maintained that as the first fight all the way through.
Which is not always the case.
Which is a big deal. It was supposed to be for a WBC title and a Lumpinee title.
Well, let me pull back from these details first. Just in case somebody's watching this and doesn't understand why women do not fight at Lumpinee Stadium.
Okay, you're going way back.
Way back. Because we have to give the big picture. There are people who don't even know Muay Thai. There are 3 national stadiums?
2.
Amnoy isn't?
No.
I thought it was.
No.
There are 2 big stadiums in Bangkok, Raja Damnaran and Lumpinee Stadium. Raja Damnaran is actually an older stadium than Lumpinee, especially now that Lumpinee moved to a new location. But Lumpinee, because it had the king's patronage more, it seemed, became the jewel of Muay Thai in Thailand, the jewel stadium, the one with the greatest honor.
It's also the one that Westerners recognize more.
Yes, and but I think Thais too.
Could be.
Yeah. So rather famously, both stadiums for religious beliefs that have to do with a kind of orthodoxy of blessing, beliefs that maybe even many Thais don't even hold, right? Barred women from entering and fighting the ring because of superstitions about menstruation and the practices that were used to make the rings protected.
Yeah, animistic beliefs about spirits around the ring. There are very famously signs that were on the ring that said, "Ladies, please don't touch the stage." Like you can't even.
Well, that's
get
what
near
got
it.
that's what got so. I think that's what got the West really aware of this. Is that these photographs of "do not touch the stage" were like, this is a red line, right? That women not only can't fight in these stadia, but they can't even touch it. Which, from a Western perspective, you're like, what the fuck? And we should say, in looking at this "don't even touch the ring" is probably something that's quite new. I suspect, like when you watch Golden Age fights from the 90s, you see women coming up, like women who are gym owners, like Karahat's.
The owner of Karahat's gym, Super One Gym, is his mother-in-law, and she is like slapping the canvas. She's at the ring, like screaming at him.
Touching the canvas,
Touching the
yeah.
canvas.
And there are times when people are like,
Yeah, they come and take her away.
Take away. But there's no like the earth ended when she'd come up to the camera. And we've seen other women up by the apron. I'm guessing the "do not touch the ring" signs was because tourists started coming to
It's in English.
Lumpinee Stadium. It's in English, right? And
It also is in Thai, but it's in English.
but women probably came to the stadium, had the VIP seats up by the apron.
Taking photos with it.
Yeah,
or
exactly. They're
whatever.
probably leaning against it or whatever. So even though that feels very draconian, which it kind of is in a way, it probably also was a sign that was created pragmatically.
Yeah, and I've gone with the boys to fight at Lumpinee and Rajadamnern and gone to the corner and had the like officials that organize the corner, which to be fair, they organize corners as well where they're like, you're not allowed to be near the ring while they're fighting.
Yeah.
They kept me away from the ring. They were like, you need to stand over here.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's not a real thing. It is a real thing, but I think the starkness of it probably came about because the West started interacting with the ring much more. Thai women probably already knew that there was a kind of thing.
And like the myth around this is the 60s, right? With the nurse, the like whole legend of the nurse was the 60s, wasn't it?
Well, you can look that up, and I'll try to put in the reading notes. But
The legend of
in
the
the
nurse.
legend, well, it actually the legend isn't of the nurse in the West, in the English-speaking world. It's the legend of the TV reporter.
Oh.
That's what we came to Thailand, and
Right.
probably everybody watching this has heard of, which is that a female TV reporter got into the ring and did some interview or announcement kind of thing, and then everybody got cut.
Bad luck.
Bad luck. The protections of the ring, the gods of the ring were not happy.
And so they banned women from entering. And then we interviewed the editor or head of Muay Champ magazine, and she gave a story of that a nurse whose job was to take care of fighters in the ring had gotten into the ring to assist a fighter who clearly had already been
Yeah.
cut or knocked out or something for her to be assisting him. And then the whole night was all bad luck that way, and so they
Yeah.
damaged it.
And we actually went into the archives and dug and dug
Oh, we
and
looked so
dug
hard.
for the TV reporter
Yeah.
report. We found a source, an English language source referencing it, but there was no original report of this,
Yeah.
which means urban legend,
Yeah.
right? And now, it was also very interesting. Sorry to dig into these details, but it's very interesting.
Welcome to Muay Thai Bones.
It's very interesting that there's two versions, that in the West we heard the TV reporter version, and then the Muay Champ editor, this woman, she didn't even know of that version. She's like, everyone knows it's this nurse.
Yeah.
So these are mythologies that have been built up around the origin of why women can't go in the ring. Which is a long way, and you've written articles about menstruation and the roots of these beliefs in Thailand. They're not even Buddhist.
Yep.
And we've also experienced that Thais themselves not only don't even understand fully or digest these beliefs personally,
Or even know about the ban at all
or even
themselves.
know, like Gansak
Yeah.
didn't even know about going under the rope,
Yeah.
and Bamrung, the patron at Petronrung, was like, "Have you fought at Lumpinee yet,
Well, he
Sylvie?"
knew women had never fought there before, but he thought that by now women were fighting at Lumpinee.
Yeah, but it wasn't like a
And he's old school.
earth-shattering thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so That's to set the table. Since the 1960s or so, there's been this gender divide in Lumpinee Ring, also at Rajadamnern, but more famously at Lumpinee. God, there's so many threads to this. I'll throw this in there. When we came to Thailand, I think he's the man who ran the Rongsit Stadium. Rongsit. What was his gym? Do you remember?
I can't remember what it was called.
Yeah, but he was a promoter, and he claimed that he had put on female fights at Lumpinee Stadium in the late 60s. It was unclear that if they had actually occurred, or he's a promoter, probably could be spinning a story, or if they were put on in a separate ring.
Yeah, this is the thing, is that we did hear from someone who I don't think knew, but was like, if that happened, it must have been in a separate ring. We've been to the old Lumpinee. I don't know where they would put a separate ring.
Well, in the 60s, it probably looked very different,
yeah, it
too.
could be.
But anyways, there's even that side note that there may have been female fights within the stadium in the late 60s, but that's an unsubstantiated story. But this is the thing. Women now are on the very, very cusp of fighting in Lumpinee Stadium, in the Lumpinee Ring. Now you could,
brings me back to what I was talking
exactly.
about, is that Sanejan and Bokau were the first women to fight under the Lumpinee banner. And the reason we say it that way is that due to COVID, the Lumpinee actual stadium was closed. And so they created a studio on the 5th floor of the parking structure of Lumpinee Stadium and called it Lumpinee. Like, all the shows were called Lumpinee because that's who was promoting it, but it's not in the stadium. The reason we make a big deal about this is that it's a huge deal for women to enter a space that they have not been allowed in and have, like, very famously been barred from. So to say now women are fighting in Lumpinee who have not actually entered that ring, we don't think that's the same.
It's not even close to the same. I don't know why they portrayed, maybe the fight with Bokau and Sanejan, who's a fighter who actually has been like potentially matched with Sylvie many times, which is probably 2 weight classes bigger than you, but that's a fight we really want to see. That fight had been promoted for so long, and we're not even talking about Go Sport, which we will. Go Sport is the promotion that has been spearheading this very new, modern, internationalized vision of Muay Thai, and we'll be talking about what they're doing. But Go Sport had this fight set up for so long and kept getting pushed because of COVID. They probably had in their minds the first female Muay Thai fight at Lumpinee was going to be 2 Thais, which is really important.
Really good.
This is like gold standard. It should be. Muay Thai belongs to the Thais and to Thailand. It'd feel kind of weird if it was a Westerner and a Thai, almost. And so once they got the go-ahead from the government to put up this provisional studio in the parking structure, and when we say a parking structure, it's a parking structure, but there was a gym up there for many years with a ring, and we actually filmed in that ring.
Yeah, if you are a patron, you can look in the Muay Thai Library when Diesel Noi and Napidej work together. I think it's our 2nd or 3rd Diesel Noi in the library.
It's 3rd or 4th, yeah, but it's up there.
Yeah, but that's where this is. But they built a studio there.
A TV studio around that ring. So, but you actually fought in the Lumpinee ring. You trained in the Lumpinee ring in a weird way.
They probably set up a new ring.
I know, but I want to spin on that.
Without the green screen when I was there.
And so, I'm sorry to go into so many details, but this is actually like a really important piece of life. So all these little side things, I want to talk about them. That's what the Muay Thai Bones is about.
Yeah.
This isn't like a headline and read the first three sentences. So they put up the studio and they had this idea of like, I suspect they wanted to portray the thing as this first at Lumpinee thing because
it was intended to be.
It was intended to be. That was what it would have been anyways.
Yeah.
And then so what ended up happening was that the way it was broadcast out into social media was that it was actually the first female fight
in Lumpinee.
they say at Lumpinee, which is almost a weird thing about how social media works, because you can tag locations.
Right.
So when Siam Fight News or whatever has a story, they go at Lumpinee.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was purposefully vague that it wasn't in the ring or the stadium of Lumpinee.
Yeah.
Or like they were blurring the line to make it feel historic.
Or maybe they didn't even know, some of them.
Who's them?
Like people who were reporting it maybe just thought it was at Lumpinee.
For sure it was. Matter of fact, fighters who were originally lined up for these shows were kind of under the impression that they were going to be fighting in Lumpinee.
Yes.
And they only found out later that they weren't. What was I going to say?
Maybe the sun's
Oh, the sun is coming. I don't know what to do. Do you want to move?
Yeah, do we have to move forward or back or what?
I don't know. Okay, we're going to move this and see.
All right, so Sylvie's a vampire, so we had to move. We had to move out of the sun.
You were sparkling.
Not that kind of vampire.
Not that kind. What were we talking about?
We're talking about women fighting at Lumpinee and how social media was presenting it as the first fight at Lumpinee, but
Yeah,
suggesting in Lumpinee.
Strongly suggesting. There was no distinction at all being made in the reporting of it. And we don't know whether that was purposive or accidental. But the way things work is the first report then gets copied and copied and copied. But this is a very interesting thing that you noted in Thai. It was fought for the WBC world title because at the time, Go Sport and WBC was were
They had a relationship.
They had
a
contract together, and I think the plans were that Go Sport was going to create a series of world title fights that were all going to be at Lumpinee in this new way.
Yeah, and they clearly had made efforts in this kind of work agreement. There were new rankings. The WBC really went into their rankings and worked on filling out and creating more rankings.
No, they created female rankings.
Yeah, but that's what I mean, is that they were like, oh, look, we have nothing. We better get this put together so that we can start this process of having WBC fights at Lumpinee between women.
Right.
Yep.
And the reason why I bring up the WBC at the moment is you noticed in Thai reportage, they say Sine John won a Lumpinee belt.
This is the thing, is that when we say what they originally said, we're talking about months and months and months of them talking about the first fight, the first female fight at Lumpinee, and it was COVID. So none of this was happening, and things were changing without it even happening. And Kevin and I kind of joked, but in a sad way, that this might actually just fall apart before it ever happens. But it was supposed to be for the WBC belt and the first Lumpinee Go Sport female.
Well, this is really
title.
unclear because these are just stuff written on posters.
What Kevin's saying is that while the fact of it, from what we watched and saw with our own eyes, is that Sine John won the WBC title in her fight, this first fight that happened in the studio. But Thai reportage of this fight, which is a huge deal, she's the first female champion at Lumpinee, is that they're saying she's a Lumpinee champion, whereas the Lumpinee belt was not on that fight as far as we saw. She's WBC champion.
It literally, it's not as far as we saw. It was not on that.
It was not.
It was not. There was no Lumpinee belt. And there were early descriptions as if there might be a Lumpinee belt at risk in this fight.
It was meant to be a double thing.
Maybe. We don't know because sometimes people just make posters and put stuff on posters, right?
It's a pretty big thing to do, but yes.
Yeah, but people do these things.
Yeah.
Not to get, I feel like we're drowning in a little bit of a minutia. The idea was there was this great historic female in Lumpinee event that actually was a false start because it wasn't in the Lumpinee ring, which is the actual space that women are not allowed to enter.
Yes, and I want to make clear we are not saying that it's not cool.
Historic.
That
historic.
A female fight was promoted by Lumpinee with the Lumpinee banner. That doesn't exist. But because it's so important to actually enter the space that you were not allowed in rather than the parking garage that you can totally go in, it means something to have not been fought in that ring. And so when women actually literally enter the Lumpinee ring, that is the historic.
Well, I want to say that
point.
their fight was historic also,
Yes.
because
But it's not that.
it's not
Historic.
that history. And maybe
It's its own
from a
thing.
Western perspective, where women cannot enter that red line becomes very symbolic. Maybe in the Thai world it's not quite the same way, because in the Thai world it's a lot of honor comes from who associates with you and who supports you. So maybe for Thai women, it's less about that space and it's more about, oh my God, the Lumpinee name is now associated with women.
Yeah.
It could be, I'm just saying, that might be the more significant shift, because with the Lumpinee name becomes great power and honor. That's enough to say that for us, well, should we get into this?
I don't know.
Okay.
I cannot call it for you.
Well, during this time, Sylvie was contacted to be among the first fights at Lumpinee.
We are getting into this.
Yeah. And the curious thing was happening because when we were first contacted, we were under the impression that it would actually be in Lumpinee Stadium.
Yes.
Part of other female fights that would be in Lumpinee Stadium.
Right.
And when the Sine John fight started unfolding, and it started become clear that it's not what was being represented, we started getting very wary.
Nervous, yeah.
Wary.
Yeah.
Because in Thailand, what we've learned is when facts and details start changing, like the date of a fight or who you're fighting or whatever, the whole thing is on sand.
Yes.
So once things start changing, we are like, let's wait and see, right?
Yep.
And at the time, because it was very important to us that this thing be real, that it be a 5-round full rules fight exactly like a male Lumpinee fight at Lumpinee Stadium
You
would
have to
be.
understand that the reason Lumpinee Stadium is so significant is that historically it was very hard to get there. Like, you had to earn a name for yourself regionally wherever you were from, and then once you earned that name, you would go to the bottom of the rung of the ladder at Lumpinee and try to start earning your name there. This is, if you listen to an interview that we did with Nam Kabuan, it's the last interview with Nam Kabuan before he died, he was talking about how he basically became like unbeatable up in Buriram, and when he went down to Lumpinee, he lost his first 3 fights and was like, I'm out of my league, I have to kind of like climb my way. And that was the story of like, I've achieved Lumpinee. And women have this same like prestige of Lumpinee, but we weren't allowed to fight there.
Right. And I want to just, because it's Muay Thai Bones, I want to go further back. One reason why Lumpinee was so prestigious, and Rasha Damnern, is that it was also literally hard to get there before the railroads were built.
Or decent roads. From Pattaya to Lumpinee was like a 5-hour drive before.
Yeah, exactly. That,
Like 20 years ago.
For a long time, cosmopolitan Bangkok Muay Thai was physically cut off from provincial Muay Thai by and large. And that as railroads were built, connecting the provinces, Muay Thai was developing provincially, probably in its own island of fight crews and festival fights and everything. And then as railroads were built and roads were improved, these fighters could start coming to Lumpinee and bringing the flavors of their regional Muay Thai into this famous ring. So there, even the like what a fighter had to do to get to Lumpinee as a fighter, just skill-wise and experience-wise, there was an even older thing, which is you couldn't even get to Lumpinee.
Well, there's a wonderful story that we translated from Hippie, who's in his 50s.
Yeah.
Hippie is the 105-pound legend from the South. That's like his chaya, that's like his name. is he was just the star of the South. He's from Nakhon Si Thammarat, which is this kind of capital-ish area down in the South. He tells the story of taking the train by himself up to Bangkok for his first fight in Bangkok.
He was a little kid.
He was picked up by like his uncle or friend or something and brought to this gym. And he fought Chachai Sasakun for his first fight in Bangkok. It wasn't at Lumpinee, but their rematch,
Future
the second one
boxing
was there.
champion, WC
but it was
champion.
totally this like, the excitement of, I get to go to Bangkok. Like, I'm going to Bangkok.
And it was physically hard to get there. Like we heard from.
It probably took him a day.
Did we hear from? Was it from Arjan Gimyu or was it from Sifu? About, like you said, that even in the 90s, when there's the golden age of Muay Thai, the roads were so bad it would take hours.
We take the motorway to get to Bangkok. It's like an hour and a half.
But
it was like a 4 to 6 hour drive.
From Pattaya.
They would leave at night to weigh in the morning.
Yeah.
Like it would take all night to get there.
So you're almost climbing a physical mountain in something that we don't appreciate now.
Yeah.
So it was really the church on the hill kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then, as you say, so male fighters have had this legend of Lumpinee, the journey to Lumpinee, which was once a physical journey, but also like the journey of a fighter.
Yeah.
Like winning all the fights in your local region and coming there. This thing has really persisted since 1950 or so, which is 70 years. Men have had this like path.
Yeah.
And then women, female fighters, have just literally been excluded.
Not you. Nope.
And there's much less developed Muay Thai in women that was fought in festival fights. It was a minor part of Thailand's Muay Thai, which has certainly in the last decade or two increased and enriched itself. Like
the last 5 years.
Even the last 5 years have really just like, and I think you get some credit for that.
No.
Well,
I was here.
Well, not only here, but you shared it with everybody, right?
Yeah.
Which is a very big deal.
Well, it made more women come.
What's going on
I'm
there?
checking the time.
I'm looking at
it
the
made
time.
more women come, which is
1 second, we're checking on this. Oh, we got plenty of time. So, for us, this female fight it had to happen in the ring, and it had to be a real 5-round, full, traditionally judged Muay Thai fight.
which the Sine John Buakaw fight was, other than being in the Lumpinee ring. Like, that was a 5-round fight. It was for a title.
But I'm saying this promotional situation felt like it was shifting on sand.
Well, this is what I'm saying, is that after that fight happened, which was what they were holding as their introduction for months and months and months, like a fucking long time, like 6 months or something, they were like carrying this as the, like, this is the stake you put in.
Yeah.
Immediately after that, it kind of fell apart.
Well, yeah.
Which now, the reason
Wait, I don't want to jump ahead. I want to. You're like, let's get past this.
We've been on this.
Okay, where do you want to go with this?
Well, I was going to say that now it seems that very, very soon the first women will actually be in the stadium. They're opening the actual
You
stadium.
want to skip the whole part about you.
I do.
I want to figure out how to talk. Well, so anyways, Sylvie was contacted and the fight was going to be arranged between you and Fa Cheng Rai. It was someone who fought like 7 times or something like this. And we had trepidation because our usual feelings are, once things are not as they're represented, like this was represented to be in Lumpinee Stadium, now it's not, it's in this other thing, and everything just felt like it was just very like topsy-turvy. And
we have experience in this, like we know. We know.
250, 49, 50 times in Thailand we fought. Everything starts shifting around. It's not anyone's fault per se, because when COVID's down, shit is happening. And they're trying to do this first thing. They try to stream it off their website and do so many innovative things. When things shift like that, we're like, step away.
Yeah.
Not have this anywhere. And it's shifting maybe just because they're trying to do historic things. But my intuitions were, let's not do this. And you were like, this might be the only chance, because the whole thing might fall apart after 5 fights or something.
Even though it is a huge deal for women to be allowed to fight even remotely in Lumpinee, the possibility of women actually never entering that ring was high.
Yes.
Is high.
It's still high.
It's still high.
And then there was another complication in all this, which is that Go Sport was trying,
Well, say who Go Sport is.
the promotion that is making all these forward changes, was trying to create a new kind of Muay Thai for Lumpinee, which mirrored itself on entertainment Muay Thai of, like, let's say Max. 3-round fights. We're not sure if they're judging in an entertainment style, which is lots of aggression, no clinch.
Yeah.
But they're mixing in traditional fights with entertainment fights.
Yeah, so basically what this looks like is like the first 4 fights on the card are 3 rounds. Then there are like 4 fights after that that are all 5 rounds. So it's like it's a little bit of a half and half. The women originally, because they were fighting for WBC titles, projectedly, were all 5-round fights because
Right.
it's for a title.
Right.
Which we were like, that's promising, that's good, that's 5 rounds. But it's weird that at Lumpinee there are 3-round fights happening at all. That's not a thing.
Yeah, but this is part of the forward-looking concept that Go Sport has.
But I have to say this.
Okay.
The Go Sport there's a lot going on at Lumpinee that even made the possibility of women being there possible, and a lot of it is not wonderful. It's the stadium got in a lot of trouble at the very start of COVID. They've changed directors, they've changed who's in charge of it. Lots of things are going on, and they've decided that they're going to completely cut out gambling from taking place in Lumpinee, which is a huge change, like a very significant effort to be making.
Well, let's pull back on that.
Wait first.
Okay.
The point I'm making is that Go Sport is part of this. Everything is completely different. They are not experienced promoters in the history of promoting at Lumpinee or even kind of
They're
like
not the
big
traditional
Muay Thai.
power centers.
So the
Yeah.
possibility of women fighting there, you have these people who don't have experience promoting Muay Thai, and they're like, yeah, women too. The reason they're like, yeah, women too, is because they are not established long-term important promoters in Thailand. So that's great that they're this new thing, the like young bloods coming in, and they're like, oh, we're going to change things. That's why women are allowed to be there. But their lack of experience and their priorities and focus are not women are equal and we love them and we want really high caliber fights happening at Lumpinee. They're like, we're also bringing in 3-round fights. We want a light show. We want sound. We want international competitions with like, they're talking about making it like a sport
Center,
center. So that's my piece. You can talk about.
Well, I didn't want to run over this gambling thing.
No, you can go back to that.
Yeah.
But that's not the point I was making.
Yeah. There was a revolution in the culture of Lumpinee when COVID first hit Thailand. The first main cluster, what happened at Lumpinee Stadium.
Yeah.
And what happened was Thailand can get very polarized at times. And Muay Thai has a long history of a low reputation in the country of being criminal, low class, rural, like hillbilly-ish. Like the demographic is, it's not the shiny example of the modern Thai middle class or upper middle class person. And so when COVID hit Lumpinee, Muay Thai itself took on this stigma, or the stigma of Muay Thai got reinflamed in a very powerful way. And a big part of that stigma has to do with criminal associations of criminal activity and gambling, which in Thailand, gambling is seen as a sin. Like, one thing about Lumpinee is one of the few places you can legally gamble aside from the national lottery, right? So there's a sinful kind of dimension to Lumpinee gambling.
It's a vice.
It's a vice, yeah, that'd be to say that. And so when this happened, and famously, Thailand's Muay Thai faces, yes, gambling has ruined Muay Thai storyline that we get in the West. We get a shorthand version of it. And yes, very powerful gamblers are able to swing odds and apparently like muscle, who's going to win fights, which is ruining the sport itself in terms of like the best fighter might not win, the best performance might not win. And so there is a kind of like swinging discrediting of gambling as a culture, which is also the culture that holds Muay Thai together.
Yeah, and Thai politics, the buzzword right now for Thai politics is anti-corruption. They're doing all of this work towards anti-corruption. Gambling and its effects or its influence on Muay Thai and outside of is considered corruption. And so it's like part of this as well.
Yeah.
But when this cluster hit, the government had asked, they had not like put mandates on, but they had asked for the shows to be stopped because COVID was coming in. And Lumpinee decided to go ahead with a show that they had scheduled a little bit after the cutoff time. And they had this show, and then a cluster came out of it, many of whom were reporters and gamblers and things like this. So gambling became like a high point. But Lumpinee is military, and the government is military. So it was seen as this like corruption.
And this led to a huge kind of like anti-corruption movement within the Lumpinee military culture.
Yep.
They closed within the Muay Thai world, renowned stadia
Outside of
Bangkok.
Yep. In order to stop gambling,
was
basically.
One in
Karat,
which we love. What is the name of that? Forgot the name. Surinari. And I think there was one in Konkan. And this was like, we are purging all corruption, also all gambling, any associations with this. And
there was talk of Lumpinee shutting down altogether.
And there was talk of
again.
Lumpinee shutting down.
Yep.
And so there was a kind of like death sentence for Muay Thai that was sweeping through politically through Thailand. And what about?
This is so big.
Yeah, it's so big. And just to take a moment, the killing off of these provincial stadiums owned by the military was actually threatening the lifeblood of actual Muay Thai, because these were epicenters for provincial Muay Thai, which actually has maybe the closest living root to traditional golden age style fighting. Like, many people believe that real Muay Thai doesn't even exist in Bangkok anymore. We had a Muay Siam reporter was saying that, right? Or who was saying that? Phut Pat Noi?
Phut Pat Noi to a Muay Siam.
They were saying there was no more Muay Thai left, even in Bangkok. And the
Muay Siam reporter said, no, it's still happening in Buriram or
in the provinces.
He's the Isan chapter.
Yeah, and that was accepted. This was at Nam Kabun's funeral the day before his cremation, and there was just this feeling like the provinces are the last vestige of real Muay Thai, and then the government, under this anti-corruption wave, killed off the two kind of important stadia of the provinces, and was thinking of shutting down Lumpinee. And this is we had a Muay Thai Bones a long while ago when COVID first hit, and they had ruled out knees in which was so crazy in stadium fights. Do you remember that?
Yeah, because they were like, "This will spread COVID," and you're like licking each other's faces anyway.
Okay, but it was ridiculous.
It was ridiculous.
But we were alarmed because in Thailand, traditional, everything changes fast.
Yeah.
When something changes, you don't know what it's going to be. And we're like, they're going to take Muay Khao out of ring Muay Thai because they're going to mimic one championship, which is as removed clinching, and entertainment Muay Thai. And we were genuinely worried about it. This is the thing. We could feel that Muay Thai was going to change radically. We just didn't know what was going to change.
You don't know what's going to stick.
And what changed was, one of the things that changed was female Muay Thai women in Lumpinee.
Which,
at
again,
that time
has yet to happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
But, okay, women promoted by Lumpinee changed. Like, this was something that was so inconceivable that, I don't know, how was that, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, when you asked Sao Singh, who's the most famous female Muay Thai fighter in Thailand, probably.
We interviewed Sao Singh about this, and she so adamantly, laughing, but adamantly was like, they will never let women fight at Lumpinee.
It wasn't even on the horizon of an ambition.
Yeah. It was like preposterous.
It was ridiculous. And this was maybe, how long ago? 3 years ago? 5 years ago?
It was before Channel 8 existed, so I'm not sure.
Okay. Take
Maybe
a guess.
after the summit, so after 2018.
Okay. We went from never, never, ever, from a female fighter who was very famous and had achieved so much, she never even imagined it was possible.
If she were a boy, would be fighting at Lumpinee.
Oh, for sure. And because of COVID, and this gambling anti-corruption thing that disrupted the entire structure of Muay Thai in Thailand, women are now. Was that us?
Go get that? Yeah, you keep talking.
No, I'm gonna put this on pause. Okay, so sweeping across Thailand is this anti-corruption movement, which is shutting down major parts of the structure, of the infrastructure of the growth of Muay Thai, the connections between provincial Muay Thai and Thailand itself, because the traditional powers of promotion in Thailand are also perceived to be infiltrated by corrupt influences like powerful gamblers. And well, this is the important part. Because everything is being shut down, that's where Go Sport, with this very innovative concept of we're just going to do a radically new Lumpinee, was able to step in, because Lumpinee was even rumored to be shutting down permanently.
Yep.
And so it's like, if we're going to shut it down, let's just recreate it.
Yeah.
And so they've come up, and I know you seem to minimize that they're including women, like, oh, they're just throwing in all these modern things, 3-round fights and whatever. But this is really an internationalized vision of Lumpinee Stadium that it's not women are just like, let's throw in the clowns.
I'm not minimizing that they're including women. I'm lamenting that so many elements that I don't like come along as a price for having women there. That's
right.
My tone.
Yes. And right. I agree. But this is the irony of the whole thing, which is you wanted women, but including yourself personally, to be folded into as not an exception, integrated into the traditions of Lumpinee. To not your gender to not be the thing that makes you not one of us.
Right.
And because COVID had such a powerful effect on Muay Thai in general, so much of what you wanted to join does not exist anymore.
Yes.
And it's kind of like that monkey's paw thing.
Yeah, well, tell what the monkey's paw is, because we know what that is, but not everyone knows what that is.
Well, go ahead. Maybe you probably know more.
The monkey's paw is a short-term, shorthand way of talking about how there's a price to wishes or whatever. So it's a story about you get a monkey paw and it the paw gives you grants you wishes, but you have to be very careful what you wish for because every wish you make has a consequence.
And not only that, it's a bad consequence.
Yes.
It's not a consequence. And matter of fact, I think no matter how careful you are, you're fucked no matter what you wish for.
There's a Simpsons episode, a Halloween episode, where Homer gets the monkey's paw, and everything is disastrous. And then his final wish, he wants a turkey sandwich, and he's like, I don't want anything weird. I don't want it to have a turkey from Zombieville or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And as he eats it, it's pretty good, but the turkey's a little dry, and he has a meltdown.
So the turkey's a little dry. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's worse than that. It's much worse than that.
Okay. So it's enough to set the table that so much had to change in Muay Thai, coincidentally, in order to create this pathway for women into the Lumpinee ring. And as you say, as of this recording, on the 13th, by the time you watch this, it's probably already happened, hopefully. Celeste, and I don't even know who the Muay Thai fighter is. Celeste, a female fighter from Australia,
Nong Boop, I think. Nong Noop, something like this.
are scheduled on the Go Sport card to fight in the Lumpinee ring, to actually go in the ring, in the stadium.
However.
Well, this is sad.
This is the monkey's paw.
It's a 3-round fight.
Yeah.
Which is weird because it was scheduled as a 5-round fight 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Now it's a 3-round fight, joining the rest of the 3-round fights that are on the card. There are 5-round fights on the card. And this is where, man, I hope you stay with us, because this is our minutia. This is our world. This is a kind of selfish Muay Thai Bones, because we're sharing with you the things we care about. From our perspective, when you were contacted to fight at Lumpinee Stadium through the Go Sport thing, the only thing that made us really believe it was going to be an authentic 5-round, traditionally ruled and judged fight was that a WBC belt was being fought for.
It was like collateral. It was proof.
But wasn't that it was the belt. It's that the WBC has largely a traditional rules framework in which belts are fought for. So if a WBC belt was going to be on the line, we knew that the fight was going to be a full rules traditional fight. We were very concerned about this because Sylvie has purposefully not fought, and she's been asked many times to fight on these entertainment Muay Thai shows of Super Champ and Hardcore. She's been contacted by one. We have tried, she one day might be forced to join these promotions, but we kind of stand purposefully on the side, the less popular side of trying to fight 5-round fights in Thailand. We came to Thailand, we don't want to fight a westernized version of Muay Thai, right?
Yeah, it's these 3-round entertainment shows, and especially Channel 8 and the way that they've been promoting women, have been great for female Muay Thai.
Yeah, we don't want to say that that's
I'm not saying it's bad. It's not what I'm doing.
It's not what you're about.
Yep.
And we also have to say that women fighting at Lumpinee would not have happened without the success of these entertainment Muay Thai.
1,000,000% not. Yeah.
They're copying. Go Sport is copying a version. They're making a version of the success of that Channel 8 fights had, and Channel 8 fights are copying the success that one has had. So one championship is. Why are you not listening to me anymore?
You don't think they're copying Max?
Well,
or Thai fight?
No. The true copying thing is Max was original with its let's make up rules that Westerners can win by, take out clinch, make everybody aggressive, don't let Thais retreat. Fine. And notably, don't let women fight because we're traditional. It was like, we're going to be totally untraditional in every single way, except this one way. We're really traditional, no women. And Sylvie actually got under the wire on that and fought the last, well, it wasn't the last, but it was.
I'm one of 4 women to ever fight in the stadium.
But you were the last female fight at Max Muay Thai Stadium before they decided to get traditional. And then they had another exception later.
Oh, I didn't know it went that way. Yep.
Yeah. So Max had a lot of success creating this new model, and then one created its own version of it. I don't suspect that they were really copying Max because one is an international promotion.
No, one was copying UFC.
Yeah, but not as a kickboxing promotion.
No, but the bringing women and having headlining.
Well, now that's the other thing. That's the other part of it, is that the women being not only allowed in, but actually promoted to drive cards. One is copying UFC.
Yep.
Started with fucking Ronda Rousey.
Right.
So women are fighting in Lumpinee Stadium because of Ronda Rousey.
Right.
You gotta fucking say it.
Right. And Dana White originally was never women.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she changed his mind. But so it went UFC, Ronda Rousey, UFC pushing women hard, won championship, seeing how that works, and there's the fact that actually for one, they can pay female fighters much less than men, from what I hear. So you can create headline personas around female stars. It changes the perceptions of the sport. Then Channel 8 fights copy the Max model, which Max used to be on Channel 8, and then they copy the One model with female promotion. They fuse One with Max, and they come up with Sao Sing as a star, and then Dong Kong Fa. I write about this actually because Dong Kong Fa just fought for a WC World title. She was the second female that the Channel 8 fights decided to promote really, really heavily, and it's been incredibly successful using women to headline fights. When we watch these Channel 8 fights, we can't even get through the male fights. Like literally.
It's not only us. I actually see people, Thai people on my Facebook page who are like, I'm just here for the female fights and then I'm done.
Yeah. So all this is to say that this entertainment wave impacted the vision of Go Sport, and Go Sport has taken up its own version of these copyings, and they seem to be trying to fuse traditional 5-round fights with 3-round fights. We still don't know if 3-round fights are judged in a traditional way or a new, like a entertainment way. And I guess what I want to say is, as much as this is all a negative, in that so much of tradition is being bulldozed away, this is also part of the modernization or the internationalization of Muay Thai values in the world, where women are respected as full fighters. Like in the UFC, female fights are regarded with great esteem. Like you hear legitimate fans of the UFC being like, is such female the best striker in the UFC?
Well, we just watched Rose fight, and she was the co-main event. Like there were no co-main event female.
Yeah, I suspect they've even main evented.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And so it's just to say that as you personally had this dream, and we posted several years ago that an ambition was to fight at Lumpinee Stadium and win a Lumpinee belt. It was one of 3 ambitions that we posted. That was several years ago. The dream was actually to join the traditional realities of Lumpinee.
Yeah.
It wasn't actually at Lumpinee no matter what.
Yeah, and there are layers to this. Like, Lumpinee moved. Like, when we talk about Lumpinee, we're talking about the new Lumpinee, even though the name Lumpinee carries with it the original old Lumpinee. So someone like Diesel Noy or Karahat, who fought in the old Lumpinee, when they talk about the new Lumpinee, it's already this kind of like dampened, watered down, this is not the original Lumpinee.
Right.
But it still carries this heft of the name. And so there's yet again this kind of transition that's like Lumpinee still has this kind of prestige to its name that isn't wearing off in the way that it's transitioning so quickly, so that the new promotion of Lumpinee is very different from even the like traditional. And
I actually, to be honest, we actually were going to make this a Muay Thai Bones podcast subject like 2 years ago or something, but I know you really wanted to fight at Lumpinee, but for me, from my perspective, I'm like, it's not even 2 years ago, it's not Lumpinee anymore. They call it Lumpinee. It's another building. It has a completely different set of standards and traditions and quality of fighter. I'm like, I don't even understand why you feel that way, but you did feel strongly, and I respected that. And I don't want it to be lost that I'm not just saying these are all terrible things, but it's like with the internationalization of the sport comes the erosion and maybe even disappearance of all the things you wanted to join.
Yeah, it's.
Let's go put it this way. Somebody, they want us to keep the project secret, came and interviewed Sylvie about, there's a project about Lumpinee, and interviewed Sylvie about Lumpinee Stadium and whatnot. And it was a pretty good interview, but in the fucking interview, you start
He's crying about me crying.
You start crying.
Yeah.
And you say, I think he asks you, what have you given up, or how hard have you tried to get there, or whatever. And you're like, I ground myself to dust, or something like that. Just like, you're barely like surviving to reach that fucking finish line of whatever that is, this kind of acceptance or something. And it's like fucking an incredible, I don't know if the project will ever be published, broadcast, but it's fucking incredible. I was shocked the depth of what you were feeling. And like it really surprised me. And so maybe can we talk about that? Like, what were those tears? What are those tears? Because that's really what Lumpinee is to you. Maybe we go this way. You had these really special experiences of coming with the boys to Lumpinee.
Yeah.
As a kind of helper, cheerleader person. And you had this incredible experience with the shoes.
Yeah.
Well,
That was at Raja Dammer.
oh, that was Raja Dammer.
Yeah.
But it's the same dynamic.
You want me to tell the story about the
I'm going
shoes?
to tell the story about the shoes because it reflects on what we're talking about.
It also shows the ridiculousness of everything. So I went with the boys to fight at Raja Damner, and I'm not Thai. I'm very clearly not Thai. I don't like get by as Thai. Sometimes Asians who are not Thai can like just not talk, and they'll let them in for free. Canoes like don't talk, and they'll think you're Thai and you can go in. They were trying to get me in for free, and the way to do that would be for me to be what's called a piliang, which is like a cornerman. I can't be a cornerman. Like there is no way a woman can be a cornerman. But rather than realizing obviously I'm not going in as a cornerman, the way to fool them was that I had sandals on, which you can't wear as a corner. You have to wear closed-toed shoes and long pants. And so I put on Chicken Man's shoes.
Chicken Man's is a crew at the gym.
I have ridiculously small feet. I have very small feet. And so I'm wearing his shoes, like clown shoes, to sneak my way in. This is totally like 5 owls in an overcoat kind of thing. Like, obviously I'm not what I'm pretending to be, but because I'm wearing closed-toed shoes, they're like, okay, she's coming to corner for this person. And so I went through, and Chicken Man wore my sandals basically just on his big toes, like shuffling in. And then once we made it into the stands, we could switch our shoes back. But it was this incredible, like, hard rule, no women, no farang in for free, but me being a corner, I could come in. But the proof of me being valid was that I was wearing closed-toed shoes.
And there's almost like you just have to follow the protocol in some weird way.
Yeah.
But this is the reason I wanted you to tell that story.
That's funny. It's so crazy.
But I wanted to tell this story because you've gone with the boys to Lumpinee Stadium. You went there for when Angie fought,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
you experienced the gender divide in the way they were like sexually harassing her kind
Yeah.
of in the changing room.
And I was actually a really important ally for her there as a woman, because she's a woman in this completely male space being treated completely inappropriately. And even though I couldn't fight there, I was barred from what she was able to do.
First visibly trans fighter at Lumpinee Stadium, Angie
My
Petrarung.
simply being there
Sylvie's
was
friend.
like a bodyguard or something for her.
And so you've trained with these boys, like at Petrarung, you trained very hard with the actual boys that fight at Lumpinee Stadium.
Yeah,
you
kids I can beat.
You are their equal. You are their equal in the training ring.
Yeah.
And then you go with the fight family. It really is like a family.
Yeah.
And then you experienced firsthand this invisible line I'm guessing, maybe you can tell me, that is what led to your tears.
I don't know. I don't remember what he was asking me in that interview, but that when I'm there, like at Lumpinee and Rajadamnern, I actually prefer the stadium of Rajadamnern to Lumpinee, maybe because it's new Lumpinee. But when I'm there and I'm just like, again, it's this thing where like there is no gender divide when you're in the world of Muay Thai of what the highest achievement is. They don't say to girls, your highest achievement is this. Like, everyone agrees what Lumpinee and Rajadamnern mean and what it feels like. And when you're there, I'm like, I'm going to cry again. When I'm there, I'm like, I want to fight here like I want to breathe. And they're like,
what is that?
And they're like, nope, you hold your breath. Like, you don't get to be here. And I don't mean to be unkind, but it is simply a fact that absolute fucking Muppet Western men can fight there. Like, no problem.
Well, you say Muppet, literally someone can have their very first fight ever at Lumpinee Stadium.
Yep.
Like, it, for those that don't know, there was a kind of like tourist version of Lumpinee that wasn't on the main card, that wasn't before actual fans
like an
or anything.
Show.
Yeah,
and like a matinee.
But they would kind of create these like experiences of going into the ring and fighting, and they were probably very meaningful for these people. But the standard of Lumpinee, it wasn't like this is like 1994, right? This is already Lumpinee had these like porous avenues, but you felt like, holy shit, 250 fights, and I can't even have this as my dream.
Yeah.
Right. And
now you can, and it's just not the same thing at all.
Lumpinee itself and Muay Thai itself had to change so radically that in order to create the space for women, so that it's not recognizable in the same way, and they are purposefully, it's not. This isn't being done about women. This is actually being done about erasing the traditional structures and power centers of Lumpinee Stadium, which are in part perceived as corrupt or corrupted by gambling interests. And this Go Sport vision, the Lumpinee vision is they want to make it a martial arts academy where training can happen. Some versions of the new Lumpinee, maybe the Go Sport version, almost involve no ties in the audience.
Yeah.
Like, if we don't let the ties in, then the gamblers can't come in. They're having a very hard time about shutting gambling out because gambling can be done by phone. They wanted people to drop their phones off on some of these COVID promotions, and it's very hard to extract gambling from Muay Thai because gambling actually is yes, there's a problem with huge, powerful gamblers that can swing odds, but everyone is interested and passionate about Muay Thai because gambling also creates equity between fights and individual investment in particular fighters. And so they're trying to they end up straining out the Thai-ness of Lumpinee Stadium.
Actually, this is a side thing, this is not the subject,
Okay.
but if we have time after talking about our other things, there's a thing about gambling when I was talking to Sifu that relates to that I would want to talk about.
Okay, good. So Go Sport has this vision, it seems, we can only tell from the outside, that they are going to stream these fights on a website or an app, that these fights will be maybe pay-per-view.
It was also on a delay so that you couldn't gamble.
Yeah, they were going to delay the fights like 2 minutes or 5 minutes so that gambling could be suspect. There was talk of there being no ties in the audience. And I think that, just to bring up a little side thing that I've written about, is that something that might have inspired this internationalization vision is what happened in Pattaya around the time of Max. Max was having great success broadcasting their show. It was like a very highly rated Muay Thai show, right? But they also had great success because Chinese tourists were feeding the stadium itself.
It's part of a package tour, so like it was just part of the. You pay to come to Pattaya and do 9 things, and one of them is go to Max.
But they were taking in income,
Yep.
not from Thai audience, but from huge groups of Chinese tourists.
Yep.
And that success then modeled other stadiums. Was it JF Stadium?
That was crazy.
You guys don't even know what this is
so weird.
because it's not even meant for you.
No.
The JF Stadium where Sylvie fought one time but became a side center thing was a stadium of 3-round entertainment fights that was put on exclusively for Chinese tourists. And we went to this fight and it was incredible. The Chinese tourists would come in these buses like fucking clockwork, military style
Like
clockwork.
literally no one in the stadium, and then within 5 minutes the entire thing was full, and they'd stay for 2 fights, and then just the entire
No,
thing
it
was
was more
empty.
than 2 fights. It was like
they
a
would
little
come in
card.
like
It was
the
a little
second
card.
one.
Yeah, it was a little
But
card.
it wasn't even like before it starts and after it ends.
true,
It was
that's
like
true.
the fights are happening and they kind of cycle in and go out.
So Chinese tours would come, and obviously COVID fucking wrecked this model.
that was bad.
But Chinese tours would come and just fill the stands like. Brrr. It was the most incredible thing you saw, and then they would put on another card, and none of this was broadcast or anywhere. It was basically a Muay Thai show, but the fights were real, but under entertainment rules. But they were modeling themselves after Max's success, their stadium success, not their broadcast success. And I suspect that some of the innovative thoughts about Lumpinee Stadium were also modeled on the JF idea, which is that you could put on Muay Thai fights at Lumpinee Stadium and don't bring ties. You could just fill in with tour packages.
Yeah, but how insane is it to try to create that model during COVID when
Well,
COVID is what killed those other 2 models? There's no Max
Well, baby,
now,
there's
and
no,
there's no JF
they
now.
didn't. They're not creating that for COVID. They're creating it for after COVID.
No, I know. I'm saying that during COVID to like
Well,
try to create this tourist model is insane.
They're not creating it. They're creating an app model.
I had heard actually originally when they moved from Old Lumpinee, which they had to do, the lease was done, the land belongs to the current king and he didn't renew it, that when they moved to the new one, which is kind of out in the middle of nowhere in Ram Intra, that the plan was to bus people out.
Probably this has been the long-term idea. They made it very modern. They put in air conditioning and
LED screens.
Yeah. So this evolution of Lumpinee was already afoot, and Lumpinee was struggling getting people out to it. With COVID coming and just wrecking infrastructure, and there being an anti-corruption move, Go Sport seems to have stepped in and like, let's do things fucking totally hyper modern. Nothing like Lumpinee Stadium. And maybe, I'm guessing, bus in these chunks of tourists, like Chinese tourists or something like that, on these packages. Oh, I have to stop this. 1 second. Okay. And so they can develop maybe a kind of like app streaming model with Chinese tourists or tourist packages, but without any gamblers.
That's their idea, yeah. That's the
Well,
idea.
we're guessing from afar. We don't know. But the idea is to remove gambling out of this purge and to adopt international values, which is, a lot of this feels like it's a commercialization, but along with the commercialization and monetizing a Muay Thai come actual international values, which is women and men are respected the same and they have the same rights, and women are celebrated just like male fighters are celebrated. And so along with this radical change is also occurring some of the things we value because we're Westerners too, and you're a feminist, right? So those values come in, and these model things, these imitate or copy things that like IFMA has long talked about. Like when we talked with Stephen Fox, the head of IFMA, he's like, come on, you're in the year 2020. Why are you having these sexist, superstitious things keeping women out of your ring? Move into modernity. Like he talks to Thais this way, and he's like, we need equal rights, Olympic vision of Muay Thai. This is something that Stephen Fox and IFMA has been pushing, creating for over 20 years, a kind of international concept of the fighting arts.
But this is kind of an incredible thing to me, is I don't want to make this broad of a statement, but there is a tendency for Thai groupism to celebrate something broadly and not actually look at how hypocritical it is. So Thais love that Stamp and Loma are like international superstars on these shows, and yet they're not like, how come we don't have opportunities for them here? Like there's no, like they could not fight on our scene. They're like, yes.
The reason they had to do that was they didn't have opportunities. Their careers were going to end. And I write about this in my article about Dong Kham Tha, is that when you hit 16, 17, 18, you have no Muay Thai future. You had in the past no Muay Thai future in the country. There's been, Dong Kham Tha is an example of someone who does have a Muay Thai future that has created out of some of these shows.
And because things are changing here now.
But Stamp and Loma, when they made their moves, they had no move. Yeah. It's almost like Samrak had no more future. He couldn't fight in Lumpinee Stadium for a belt, so he's like, I'm going to go win the Olympic gold. Like, Thais, when they hit the wall, they find other ways of expressing, of finding opportunity. But you're right, Thais are not like, let's change Thailand so that the Lomas of Thailand can be famous here. There is a kind of like aspect of Thai honor or concept of prestige that always overvalues international success as well. That's why world championship boxers from Thailand actually get far more celebrated than like absolute goat in Muay Thai.
Yeah.
Like,
and Buakaw and Sanchai, when people are defending how valuable they are as fighters, they talk about because they make us famous in the world.
And so what Go Sport is doing also is creating a pathway, an internationalized concept of prestige for Lumpinee for the world, which is why they're bringing in these equitable concepts of gender and performance. But if you have a Lumpinee Stadium where there's no ties, no gambling, it's being streamed on an app, fights are on 3 rounds, women are fighting, you're dealing with a radically different Lumpinee than the one that you dreamed of being a part of.
Yeah.
And so, working our way back, there was this feeling, oh, God, man, this is so complicated. I'm sorry. Guys, our Muay Thai Bones are not always like this, but this is just a historic one.
My favorite thing is that our headline for this subject is women fighting in Lumpinee, and then it just like
I don't even
goes
know,
everywhere.
baby. It's so crazy. So, this being said, this movement towards this modernization of Lumpinee was happening in concert with the WBC, who was making this huge investment in ranking male and female fighters and creating weight classes all over the fucking world.
Yep.
There's never been a ranking system, and this has only been around for 6 months or so, it seems, but I've not seen a female ranking system, even though there's some serious problems with it. It's still going. There's fighters on there who don't fight and wrong weight classes, whatever. This is the best female ranking system ever, like by far. And they're committed to updating it. And the idea seems to be that we've got to have, in order for us to have real world title fights, we have to have real rankings and have people fighting within the rankings to see who's the best.
And then in order to legitimate the rankings, have those people fight each other and like actually square it out. Yeah. The way that male ranking works.
Exactly. And some of this you can read is politicized. People are put on rankings suddenly and then taken off the ranking just whether they're going to be fighting or not. Like, who knows what's going on behind? But the will behind it is very powerful and beautiful.
And the intention is good.
It's more than good. It's revolutionary.
Yep.
And they were partnered with Go Sport. So Go Sport's doing this radical modernizing thing with like young, hip-looking announcers that speak English and Chinese and Thai, like full-on internationalization. And then WBC is bringing in, honestly, the Muay Thai structure, the traditional framework of Muay Thai. So, when the promotion started, the sands started shifting, we started getting very stressed.
Yep. And there were disagreements and parting of ways and whatever going on within those structures, which is like this one gives base to that one, and then they're like...
You got me totally lost. I know you're trying to avoid something, but I can't follow it. What is this base?
Say what you're going to say.
Okay. So, Sylvie was training to fight Fa. I think it was going to be the second fight? Third fight? Yes. Training hard to fight. It was going to be, it come to be understood that it was going to be in the parking lot structure, but it's still under the Lumpinee banner. And it was like, Souris Manfredi was due to fight Don Kong Fa, a big, wasn't that?
Well, a long time ago.
Yeah,
By
but
the time it was actually announced, it was...
they swapped out Don Kong Fa, who was like one of the best female fighters in Thailand, for a much lower tier female Thai fighter.
Good. Pet Gunga was very experienced.
Oh, was she?
She is, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that at all. I've never heard of her.
She was going to fight me once, but she's much bigger than me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, this, oh man, it's so complicated.
She ended up not fighting
because
she had school. She had a school issue.
Yeah, but which is what Thai girls say when they don't want to actually fight. Anyways, not to get too much in detail, the WBC, which had been sponsoring the first fight with Sine John, pulled out of the Souris fight, which was supposed to be for WBC title. The important part about this whole thing is the presence of the WBC was the only thing that was the stamp that this was not going to be an entertainment Muay Thai fight.
Yes.
And for us,
when it pulled out, that fight got changed to 3 rounds, which makes it an entertainment fight.
And so we are like, and so what we write about on the forum about how this went down. There was dispute with the contract and who held the contract and who would pay for the sanctioning. Whatever. It was a squabble, but for us, it was like red flag, red flag, red flag. It's like, holy fuck, the things that are being advertised, who fucking knows what's going to happen? As it happened, Sylvie suffered an injury in training, and that aggravated another injury, and it got to this point where this is not good going forward.
It was one of these situations where it's like, if this were for one of the first fights in Lumpinee for a title where it's definitely going to be 5 rounds, I don't care that much about the title, but like this is going to be the chance at Lumpinee, this is going to be something like this, you can push through that injury for that. But when it's like, will I do this for a fight that's now got none of the things pulling it together that I wanted?
It just felt like, it's not only that. Once things start shifting, you have no idea what's going to shift.
Yes.
Like, we have so much experience in this, you literally are walking into chaos. Things can go exactly as they're described, or they could be just like totally new rules, totally different opponent.
And it can happen at the last second.
Like, literally you're walking in, and once you're there, you're in, and it's like there was a serious injury that was going to be hard to get through, and this feels crazy. And Souris was posting some pretty harsh things about what was happening.
When she explained what had happened, it was jarring. It was a warning. But I want to say this, is that part of my, you called it a dream, part of my talking about how I always wanted to fight at Lumpinee, I don't want to be necessarily the first of 2 women to fight at Lumpinee. I love that if you're the first of something, you are the first of 2 because you necessarily have an opponent. So for me, there was a really big deal about being the first to fight at Lumpinee because that means that women are entering into a space that they've never been allowed. But more important than being the first at all is that if you get through the door, what you do when you're getting through the door, if you're not holding that door open for other people to come after you, fuck being the first of anything. Like, the fact that I fought at Max Stadium, and then almost nobody ever did after that. I don't care about that accomplishment.
That's a really good example.
And a lot of what's happening with all the women who are fighting, even in the stadium, even in the studio, even in the stadium, things like this, it's the first line of women creating this change in history. All of these fights are important. But given how shaky it's been, we keep biting our nails like this is going to be the thing that just collapses it, and then nobody else gets in through the door. Like this is a freak thing that they tried and it fell apart.
That's the fear that it's going to be this thing that's tried. And I can feel that Go Sport is fucking trying really, really hard. And unfortunately, from our perspective, it also seems like the powerful aspects of traditional Muay Thai, often gambling related, are like, oh, you're gonna try to like wipe us out? Fuck you. Yeah. They're not being embraced by the powers, some of the powers that be. So they're swimming against a very strong current. It is very hard what they're trying to do. Yeah. And their vision is so kind of radical. It's so, they're trying so many first things at one time. Like if you're gonna try one first thing, you got the stability of everything else going on. But if you try 5 first things, you're going to stream your app. You're going to delay the stream so the gamblers can't work out. You're going to use new promotional connections, not the common ones.
You're in a studio, so you're going to do a green screen thing.
Yeah.
Nobody knows how the technology works or whatever.
Well, don't be mean about it.
It didn't work.
But it doesn't matter. You try new things.
Yeah.
Every new thing you try has variables attached to it. So when you try 5 new things, you have variables everywhere.
Yeah.
And some of them are going to...
Many of them are not going to go.
But no matter what happens, shit is going to not happen on some of those variables, like, and many of them maybe.
Yeah.
And so there was just this feeling like this huge historic thing is happening, but Muay Thai itself and Lumpinee itself is also so radically changed in this. And we actually, this is all happening in live time. We don't even, it's not even changed, it's changing.
Yes.
And the disagreement or the difficulties with the WBC and Go Sport seem to have been solved. There's been a new announcement.
Starting next year, though, they said.
It doesn't matter, don't have to be down on it. I'm just saying the problems we were talking about maybe have healed now.
Yeah, but I'm also keeping true to what we're saying, which is that anytime they announce something, it is going to change 20 times before anything.
Yeah, I just want to fold in a positive vision. I actually do believe that they're going to pull this thing off if they can stay aligned with the WBC. Because the WBC seems to have a world vision. It's not just a Lumpinee vision.
They're having fights all over the world right now.
Belts being presented and fought for in countries all over the world, that not just throwing the world title on everything, but local titles, regional titles, country titles. They are showing that they are actually trying to build a structure of which Lumpinee alignment could be a part of. If the Lumpinee changes can be folded into this other structure that's kind of like stabilized and growing, then I think the Lumpinee thing could actually unfold in this really cool way. You might have females fighting there 2 times a week, 3 times a week. There might be WBC title belts every 2 weeks in Lumpinee Stadium. Like, this is totally rescuable if the traditional powers and gambling associated powers of Thailand don't clamp down on it too hard.
Yeah.
Because power is power. And in Thailand, you either are aligned or you're against. Very seldom can you squeak by. And they're really trying to kind of like create this new thing. So we had to pull out of the Fa Chang Rai fight.
She fought, which is
good. Soros fought as the first Western female under the Lumpinee banner. It was in the studio, in the parking studio. Then Fa Chang Rai fought. Soros fought a 3-round fight, which worried us. Then Fa fought a 5-round fight.
Right, but for no title.
But for no title. And then Celeste is fighting supposedly in the ring on the 13th, about a 3-round fight.
Yes, which was gonna be 5, and then they made it 3 kind of within the last week or something.
Oh my God. It's not awful. It's a combination of sweet and sour.
It's the reason it's
not
awful.
awful.
The reason it's awful is because Celeste and Nongnu, I think is her name, have no say. They have no control. If they were like, it's important that it's a 5-round fight and people listen to that, that would be great. The fact that it's like, we've just changed it.
Yeah, there's no authority or weight or anything in what's possible. Ah, man, I hope people got something out of this thing, because it shows how many strands are connected to this fucking sweater.
So, and there's stuff we didn't even go
And what
on.
is your gambling thing with Sifu?
It can be a completely different
Well, tell me what
subject.
it is. Just you don't have to tell the whole. Just let me know so we can say, oh, we'll do that later.
The lack of regional champions, the way that there used to be in terms of how gambling actually created this when you go to Bangkok.
Well, let's tell the story. We've got 10 minutes.
Okay, so no, it doesn't feel like a good segue.
Oh, it doesn't?
No,
Okay,
not
because
at
you
all.
know what you're saying I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't think we're done with this subject.
we have to be done with the subject. We can come back to it on.
No, don't. I feel like I don't. We're never coming back at this moment in history. Like,
Okay, what's missing?
well, that's what I'm asking you. I'm going to take a minute and just like, this has been so. There are so many things involved with this. I know. So our hope is that Go Sport and the WBC can come together and somehow we can work ourselves, like Go Sport maintains the 5-round traditional format for the headlines,
Half its card.
the top half of its card. The 3-round fights, okay, you want to try to kind of do a exciting different style or some other thing as a prelim. I can kind of understand that's kind of interesting that they're mixing these two things.
And it's maybe because I think they actually are doing this, but they envision broadcasting to
Other countries.
outside of Thailand.
Totally. And so
And they
maybe
think that's what
the
they like.
idea is that these 5-round fights that Go Sport's doing can kind of evolve into high-level WBC affiliated promotions toward belts that are structured by rankings. Like, this is the thing we've talked about in the past, is that you can't have world titles if you don't have rankings. And basically, world titles in female fights are absolutely random matchups.
Yeah.
They are the production of gyms with connections knowing other gyms that are connected to fighters, and they're just putting 2 fighters together that happen to be in Thailand.
And probably heavily favoring one. Like, the title is for that one, and they find someone. to kind of-
Sometimes I don't think they even are purposive that way, like looking for a weak opponent. You just find who you find. Sometimes a world title fight can be between 2 world-class female fighters, but it wasn't the product of rankings. It was that it just happened.
And it's that people knew who those people were, which is part of the positive outcome of these rankings, even though they're in kind of a nascent phase right now, is that when you have actual international rankings, you have actual international interaction, which is like right now, nobody knew who to put as Thai fighters on these rankings because they didn't know Thai fighters. And so they're getting advice from people who kind of know the scene. People in Thailand have no idea who the strong fighter in Spain or Italy is. So this is kind of starting to actually create an international
Context.
Yeah.
Cross-referencing in some kind of way. And so the very presence of rankings, if we can start fighting through those rankings and not just adding a fighter to the rankings, like we've got a matchup, let's rank them both,
Yep.
like which has happened, unfortunately. If we can get to that, maybe this is just what has to happen, is that you kind of have to fudge the rankings for a while.
Yeah, when it's early,
And
I think
then
so. Yep.
you start getting the top parts of the rankings fighting each other. Like this fight against Dong Kong Fa, I wrote about it And Soros, the top 2 rankings by the WBC in super flyweight, that is what rankings are for. You find out what you rank 1, 2, even if it's somewhat political in how they're ranked in the beginning, you fight, and now you have separation, and now you have other people fight. The champion defends their belt. Like, that was a big fight.
Yeah, and to have
in
it
the
be,
history of
to
that.
have it be 1 and 2 is a really big deal, because I think even in the Sine John Bukau fight, it was like 5
Well,
and 6
I think
or
the
something.
purpose of the rankings is someone in the top 10 fights someone in the top 10.
Yeah, that's how it works,
That
but I'm
you
saying
have
that-
to. It's because you can't fly people all over the whole
Yeah.
world. I'm just saying, we're starting to get that. The WBC fight between Dong Kong Fa and Soros, we have the whole fight up on a live stream, and I wrote an article about it. That fight was going to be the Go Sport in the Lumpinee banner, and it got pulled out.
Yeah.
But it's an example of what we can hope for under the Lumpinee Go Sport battle. Even though it happened outside of it, it was planned within it.
Yes.
And then we can maybe have more and more of those.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the vision of it.
Yeah.
So even though we're kind of like frustrated by the historical state of what is unfolding, there are possibilities ahead for female fighting in Lumpinee. It could be a year from now that women are fighting in Lumpinee Stadium all the time. And maybe under significant fights.
Yeah, and maybe under promotions beyond Go Sport.
That's true too. Part of the Lumpinee vision is to not let it be dominated by single promoters, but to allow innovative, creative promoters to be involved with the stadium. I think Fairtex might promote there in the future.
They have Giet Pet and Pet Yin D have agreed to start their promotions there again.
Yeah, but I mean promoters that will also have feature female fighters.
Yeah, Fairtex has lots of women.
If Fairtex
yeah.
gets involved with Lumpinee Stadium as a promoter,
Yeah.
they have female fighters,
Yeah.
Western and Thai,
Yeah.
that you could possibly see Stamp. I don't know if one would allow that, but could possibly see someone like Stamp or Wonder Girl fight
Smilla.
there. Yeah, I'm talking about Thai female
Yeah.
fighters, yeah. Okay, how about that?
How about that?
Sylvie's like, wow, I got hit and run over by a truck. Oh my God. That was
What year is it?
an intense, oh, man.
Usually Kevin's like fast forward 30 minutes. It's like fast forward an hour and a half.
I don't know how long we talked, but it is not only, I fear, I'm always like trying to project myself into a listener. We might have lost a lot of people on that, but it's also really important to talk about these things and to show how like interconnected things are, events. These things are very seldom talked about in any public way, in any detail.
But that's the thing you were talking about with the footnotes or something, is that sometimes when you're saying why something's important or why something is significant, you have to say why it's significant, and that has
Connects
like
out.
it's like that movie we just watched where like each thing has its own set of causes.
Totally. Okay, so this topic is actually kind of related to the one we just went through, like crazy people, but also super interesting. So we're talking a really prominent gym. Is that how we're just talking about it? Is that what we're saying?
It's very popular.
Okay.
It's very well known.
Connected, well known by Westerners. The head of the gym, the gym lost one of its featured Western fighters. And this happens it was a sponsored fighter. And this happens in Thailand a lot, I suspect.
And this is a gym that has both Thai fighters and Western fighters. Some gyms are almost purely commercial where it's mostly Western fighters.
Yeah.
Some are mostly Thais and they have Westerners who fight, but they're not like kind of featured.
And when we started this, like talking about Muay Thai for a long time ago, do you remember so long ago? And remember Emma had that post about gym hopping?
Yeah, it's like her most controversial post ever.
So long ago. And there is this sense that when you come to Thailand, there's this weird world that you enter into, is that you want a traditional experience, right? you want to be treated like a Thai, be folded into Thai social structures, eat with the Thais, like learn some Thai. There's a romance about coming to traditional Thailand. But you also take with you a lot of your Western assumptions, and you're like, I'm the customer, I pay for my training, I expect training to be good, I expect to get these opportunities, these things.
I expect that because I'm paying, I have a say in things, like that you have a bit of authority because you're the one
Totally, because the
spending
customer
money.
is always right.
Yep.
And so there's a clash between not only business models, which is the Thai traditional business model of developing Thai fighters, which Westerners want to be a part of, but also the commercial business model of the customer is always right. And so there's varying degrees of how these worlds intersect and clash.
Yeah.
And it depends a lot on the motivations and investments of the Westerner. And it also depends on the nature of the gym. Like you say, there's some gyms that are almost exclusively for Westerners. So they're more in a business model,
Right.
like a commercial model. And then there's more traditional gyms that are really about building Thais to become stadium champions. And
To
they
get to Lumpinee, to like
Yeah.
pack back into our last subject.
and the Westerners want to have this authentic, I'm part of this thing. But the Westerners don't always appreciate that the further you go into the traditional model, the less control and power you have.
Yeah.
Because the Thai boys that you're eating with have no power
Yeah.
at all. And because you don't speak Thai or understand the hierarchies, you might not see any of the power being displayed.
Yeah.
But you wrote an article a while ago, why it sucks to be treated like a Thai. Right? So that's just setting the picture. This very prominent gym, the head of the gym made an announcement in Thai. Well, he was answering a question, I think.
No, he was making an open complaint that the media picked up.
Right, which was that his Westerners are coming to Thailand, being parts of authentic gyms. They're being raised into fighters, being given opportunities to become notable stars of some kind.
And are sponsored, so this whole like I'm the customer situation is complicated because now you're not paying for training and food and whatever, you're being sponsored by the gym.
Right, although I think even if you're paying for it, what they're receiving is all the things the gym is doing for the fighter.
Right.
Like, if you want to be on Channel 8, your gym has to be connected to Channel 8.
Yes.
So the gym uses its name and its weight and its connections to provide fight opportunities for you, which you get celebrated as a fighter. And so the complaint of this gym owner, we actually have to.
I just moved a little bit.
Oh no, let's start this over. We had a sunlight emergency for my little vampire. Right. So, from the perspective, as you were saying, this was a sponsored fighter, but I think it can extend out even beyond sponsorship. That even when you're paying into these traditional situations, you're seeing the social obligation differently than your gym is.
Which is coming from a very long, culturally and traditionally different hierarchy than what we think of.
Right. And I think when you take on a gym's name, which as Westerners, we feel like, oh, that's being very authentically Thai, you've made it, you're being embraced in some way, it all feels good, but there's an additional dimension which you're not aware of probably, which is the gym now feels that they have authority over you because you're carrying their property.
Yeah,
The thing they've built up.
as a married woman who has changed my name, this
Right.
is not an insignificant thing. So we think of it
That's
as
true.
like you change your gym, you change your name because it wasn't your real name. It's not that big a deal. This is like changing your family name. Like this is a very big deal.
It can be seen that way.
And it for Thais requires transferring a contract, which is a legal in the way that I legally
Yes.
changed my name. It is a legal change
binding.
between two gyms.
Totally. And so when Westerners come into these situations, whether they're just paying for training and they're going to stay for 6 months, or they get to the point that they fight under their gym's name, or they become sponsored, which is basically you no longer have to pay for training, but you are folded more into their fight team. It depends if your gym is focused on Thais or just Westerners. There's all kinds of permutations on this, but this head of this gym was complaining, which we've never seen this before publicly, that Westerners are coming, they are becoming sponsored fighters, which is the gyms view them as being supported by them. The gyms train them and give them skills
And through their connections, give them
opportunity,
give them a name.
give them weight, opportunity, and then they just leave at a certain point. They lost a prominent fighter. And also the complaint is other gyms are poaching talent,
Yeah.
which in the traditional model, talent is poached in the traditional model.
But there are legal protections for it in the Thai model, in the Thai legal system.
Yes. Well, how do you want to
Okay, so this is how it's supposed to work. The way it's supposed to work in a perfect world, the way that legally it's set out to be. A kid is brought to a gym. The parent is like, please help my kid, raise my kid, give them, training and opportunity and all this stuff. The gym accepts at their own expense because they're training, potentially feeding, basically like being dropped off to this
Sometimes
gym.
it's like an adoption. It's like
Traditionally like an
an
adoption.
orphan adoption.
Like it's
almost.
not even near your home. Like you're just sent here.
Yeah.
So at the expense of the gym is basically raising this fighter, giving them the kind of opportunities that's going to build them to have reputation, esteem, basically make them valuable on the fight scene. And then they're recouping their expense by this fighter having success, and they can have side bets or they can get kadua, like
They
whatever
can
the
bet
thing
on that
is.
fighter, exactly. And not only that, it's not just, we're training this fighter. We folded this boy into our other boys, our family.
Yeah.
That's why it's so romantic to come to Thailand and be like part of the family where all the boys eat or sleep, or romantic, like in the past, slept on the mattress with the boys.
Yeah.
When they bring in the boy, they are bringing him in to the rest of the family, and the family experience is actually part of the training.
Yeah.
So
I don't want to overuse the word traditionally. Historically,
okay.
fighters would be kind of like initially trained and brought up by their family, by their uncle, by the local gym, where they kind of get a little bit of experience fighting in the provinces, whatever the thing is. And then when you get sent to Bangkok or you get sent to the big gym in your local area, that's when a contract would be made. You don't have a contract with your uncle, but like when it's like this is now becoming an established thing, that's when a contract will literally be signed between the fighter and the gym, and probably the parent because of how young these people are. But I actually have translated one of these contracts, so I know what's in it, which has within it legally across all of Thailand, and then you can put things in it based on your own agreements, but legally across Thailand, what's going to be stamped by the sport authority of your local region is that the gym has to give this fighter fights a certain number of times every year, and this fighter has to fight a certain number of fights per year. If they decide to terminate the contract, there has to be some kind of agreement, because they tend to be 3 or 8 is what I translated, 3 or 8 year contracts.
And this might not be every contract. This might be the one that Pinu used, but yeah.
Right, but the rules about how many times you fight in a year matters. That one's real. That one's for like anywhere. So we know of fighters, Thai fighters, who their contract has not run out. They still have years on their contract, but they have a disagreement with their gym, and so they leave, but they are not allowed to fight for another gym or
they leave
in
Muay Thai.
Bangkok. Yeah.
Sometimes you'll see fighters that are pretty good go into boxing because the contract doesn't bind them to boxing.
Right. But so these contracts if that fighter becomes really good, and then maybe a bigger gym, this is more of a thing now, this was not such a thing before, but there are gyms that buy fighters now. It used to be that you would kind of like raise them from a certain point. Now there are big gyms that buy most of their stable. They buy really good fighters, and so they have this really strong stable. They have to buy the contract from the old gym. So what that means is that if I'm a big gym and I want this kid who's like kind of a rising star right now, I have to go to the head of that gym and pay, if it's a really good fighter, like 100,000 baht, 500,000 baht, whatever. Like it's a significant amount of money for their contract, and now all that contract belongs to me. I can give them my gym name.
And we watched this happen with PK Sanchai, Chadukham, who went on to PK Sanchai, became Fighter of the Year, but is not a friendly.
Well, let's come back to that particular example, because that particular example actually ties into the one that you're talking about. So that's like the way it's supposed to work. There are times like the example that you're talking about with Jadukham, where a fighter becomes really valuable. People want to buy this fighter, and in this case with Jadukham, his father tried to sell him out from under the contract of.
Okay, but we don't go into detail.
Well, this is why this is important.
Okay.
Is that this kind of thing, if there were not legally a contract, could happen. You could be like, nope, now he's just at this gym, and this gym gets all the benefit and all this stuff. But there is legally a contract that has to be addressed in order for him to work at that gym.
Yeah.
So they had to eventually, PK had to start talking to Kranu, and he ended up selling the contract, and the transfer was made. You can go to court if you don't actually sell the contract and all this stuff. So in this case, with this big gym, this fighter who is Western, and so they're sponsored.
Wait, we're going on to the other case.
Yeah, because it's relevant.
Well, no, but I want to stop real quick. These purchases of contracts are not just perfectly friendly situations. No. It's like corporate takeovers that when you have a lot of power as a gym and you want that fighter, you get that fighter. There are social pressures that are, it's not just like, whoa, how much money you want? Also, how about this amount?
And there can be sneaky things where they're like, we'll just write out your contract for 2 years and then take him.
Yeah, I mean, it's much more complicated than let's just have a negotiation. There are immense social hierarchical pressures involved in the community, such that if a powerful gym wants to buy your fighter, there's kind of nothing you can do about it in a weird way. PK has assembled a stable of fighters that have the best fighters from, and this is actually a problem in Muay Thai, in that all the good fighters are just vacuumed up and put into big mega gyms, and you don't have like mid-size regional gyms full of very good fighters, and the talent pool has gone down. So there's fewer good fighters, and they're all in big stables. My point is, though, there's also social glue and pressures that are negotiating the movement of Thai fighters.
Yeah.
And there's there's legal recourse.
Yes.
So the legal recourse means there's a limit to how much you could bully a small gym.
And this is at a certain point. For example, Ramba has like 30 kids training with him, but they're little. He devotes and invests so much into his little fighters. He's very generous. Half of them train for free.
Maybe more.
And then once they actually get good, they'll just go somewhere. Their parents who brought them and are like, please take care of my son. Once their kid actually gets good, that same parent is like, oh, we have an opportunity over here. And they just take their kid without there ever being a contract to like bind it. And so they're breaking this social kind of heart bond that's supposed to be there. They're breaking a social contract, but there's no legal contract that makes it that way. Can I go to your example?
Oh, the prime example.
The Farang example?
Yeah.
So this big gym that has Thai contracted fighters and Western sponsored fighters, Westerners don't sign contracts.
They can't.
I don't think they're legally binding. Like I think Alex has one, but I don't know if it would even be legally binding.
I don't think it is.
So So basically, we only have this social contract, and we're not from this culture, so we might not even necessarily know that we're breaking those rules. So the complaint was that this Western fighter who had, through this gym, gotten some recognition on promotions that make them valuable and all these things, had moved to a different gym because whatever happened at this original gym was no longer ideal, and this person just moved. And so he was making a complaint about it because, one, this was breaking the social rule, which Westerners maybe aren't super familiar with, but secondly, the gym this fighter went to has a social obligation to play right.
To not steal fighters.
To play right and come talk to the head of this gym and be like, hey, we'd like to take your fighter. Is this okay? There have been exchanges with Petchenrung and local gyms with fighters without there actually being an exchange of contract, where Krenu will just call that guy and be like, hey, the champ is now training with us. Is this a problem, or whatever the thing is? And he's like, no, that's fine. He can
There's
go.
a protocol. There's a social protocol. But his actual complaint was not just that this was happening, but he was appealing to the sport authority and is like, we need a regulation of movement of Westerners in this country, because yes, there's social pressures that you can bully people out of a gym, but with Thais, there's legal recourse.
Right.
There's a lever that can put a stop to this. And this head of the gym was feeling like, we have no lever.
Right. And the other gym is not playing by the rules.
Totally, the social rules.
Yeah.
And the Westerner, I am almost positive, does not fully understand the social glue of a Thai hierarchical situation. We feel, Westerners feel, my obligation to the gym is that I train really hard, right? And I be respectful. I why to the owner
they get
when
part
I
of my fight
when
purse.
I come in, they get part of my fight purse. Like, I'm doing all the right things. You might be in a gym and be like, I'm out training your Thai boys. Like, the Thai boys are training okay, I'm training harder. So we have this like work ethic Western thing where we're showing our allegiance and our respect through our work, but we're not experiencing the glue that actually controls a Thai gym. And in a weird way, you don't want to experience it.
No, it's not
because those boys have no recourse. And if you go the wrong way against a gym head, you might be given fights, but your career is over. Like, you have nowhere to go. You can't fight in Muay Thai. And it could be over nothing. Like, it doesn't have to be fair, because all the power is in the head of the gym.
Right.
And the gym only has the consequences. If he's unfair to your boys, then other boys might not come.
Yeah.
Because then the gossip starts.
Yeah.
But as a Westerner, you're not subject to that. You don't feel like you're subject. This is what's so interesting, is that this case where a gym head went public is like, Westerners are starting to gain value in the culture of Thailand's Muay Thai, such that the value feels from the Thai side, and this needs to be regulated.
Yes.
And that is new. And the truth is, the value of those Westerners is largely on the backs of entertainment Muay Thai, which we complain about a lot.
Which, because of that, this is fascinating, this applies to women too. Whereas women never had value before. You may love your female fighter, you may be like, oh, we're so glad that she trains with us, but if she went somewhere else, it was like, this is no skin off my back. Now,
nothing.
It applies to women, which is crazy.
Well, we just did a whole segment on women fighting in Lumpinee, which was created through the entertainment Muay Thai movement. These entertainment Muay Thai shows all have a huge need for Western versus Thai matchups.
Yep.
So if they're going to put on these shows, they need Western fighters.
Yes.
And one of the things that made Max thrive was Max Muay Thai in Pattaya, is that it became a huge fight destination for Western-oriented gyms that had commercial relationships, adventure tourism with Western fighters. So Western fighters were funneled towards Max.
And it actually, this blew my mind because it happened so fast.
Yeah.
Like Max had been around for a while, but they didn't have the stadium. And then they built the stadium and started doing like fights every night, which they hadn't been doing. It was a promotion that would be like once a month or something. Very quickly, Max became like the destination for Westerners. They came to fight on Max, and it was like, now I've arrived.
Because it was a televised show.
Which is so much easier than fighting at Lumpinee, which is what originally was the like, I want to fight some festival fights and then like really establish myself with a Lumpinee fight or something. And now it's like,
Yeah, I don't even know if that was a goal. Like when it was really Lumpinee, it wasn't even reachable.
Yeah.
But it became a major funnel of the adventure tourism of Thailand's Muay Thai to come to a Western-oriented gym that also might have Thai authenticity, and you'd be trained, and then you'd be funneled to Max. And then Max got copied with Super Champ and Muay Hardcore, and then there was MX or something, but there were copies of it, and suddenly there was a ecosystem of Western-friendly promotions, and then the cards themselves, the promotions themselves, the rule sets are designed so Westerners can beat Thais much of the time. Like the things that Westerners are good at were scored highly, the things Thais are good at were pushed out because they wanted to create this like sub-tier of talent of competitive fights that would be exciting, clashy on television. So what this one complaint makes clear is that this ecosystem of Western fighters on these shows, including women, now women can fight on these cards. Suddenly these fighters are not just valuable because they're customers, they're valuable because they carry the gym name and they have economic value.
Yep.
And when there's economic value for female fighters too, now the cultural ways of controlling value kick in.
Yeah.
Which is so hard because the cultural pressures don't really work on Westerners because Westerners don't see Thai.
It's so weird. They're like, we're going to treat you like a Thai, and then you're not going to behave like a Thai.
Yeah,
but
it's very
But
weird.
to a degree they are, because Thais totally fuck over their gyms and go somewhere else all the time.
No. They're contracted.
No,
what are you
the
talking about?
non-contracted one, like the Rambaz.
Yeah, the
kids.
very low, it's
The
like a
little ones.
very low level one, but those aren't very valuable fighters.
Yeah.
Those are
You've just
scrub.
invested a lot, but they're not like fighting on big cards.
Yeah, but I guess the interesting thing is the dream, when you come to Thailand, the romantic dream is to be treated like a Thai. Because of these non-Thai type shows, Muay Thai fought on them is not real traditional Muay Thai. You're now starting to be treated like a Thai, but
Right.
in the way that you don't. It's a monkey's paw.
It is. This is the theme. We should call this Muay Thai Bones Monkey's Paw. But this is also the thing about this is that you have this romantic, I do want to be treated like a Thai. I want to be like eating with the Thais, and men want to be sleeping on a floor with just a fan and no aircon and like whatever this thing is. But to be treated like a Thai sucks. Like you have very restricted movement. We think of it as this like, I get to do these things, and it's like,
well, it's kind of
it's very
weird. It's
restrictive.
kind of weird because Westerners come very often on this romantic backpacker concept to Thailand to be free.
right.
To experience freedom. Like, I have left my culture behind and I don't have to be constrained by the things that limited me where I live. I go to this exotic country. I don't even understand most of the things. Thais are non-confrontational. So basically you get a sense of freedom that's quite extraordinary.
And it feels like everything's okay because nobody said anything
Nobody
to you.
said
but
anything
they're
at all.
totally fucking like,
Yeah, but there's no consequence. There's very little consequence.
Yeah.
So it's this amazing irony where you're like experiencing this expansion of freedom, and even you come and train hard in the gym, so you actually experience a transformation of yourself as psychologically.
Yeah.
Like you become more than you were before. You're expanding, but you're actually moving as you gain value. You are moving closer and closer to restriction.
Yes, but
Invisible
what we're
restriction.
talking about of this kind of like, it was all fine before with Farang kind of like not mattering and just this kind of side business kind of thing. That's a window of when that happened. John Wayne Parr, when his guy in Australia was like, you are going to the hell. Like, you want to go train in Thailand and be in a camp, you're going to hell. Don't think you're having a fucking holiday.
Yeah.
That was real because there were no Westerners here.
Yeah.
Like, so you go and you actually are just treated like a Thai. There was this window where it became commercial, where it's like, yes, you can come kind of do the thing and whatever, and there's not really a place for you, so you kind of do a festival fight or something kind of thing, where this kind of like soft treatment took place. And now it's starting to transition back to this like social, contractual
Well, I don't think
treatment.
any kind of legal thing will be passed.
No, I don't think so.
But because they're feeling that things of value are being taken from them, there's going to be some pressures that will develop that did not happen before.
Right.
Wait, let's see what's going on here.
I'm on the wrong thing. Okay.
Okay. Speaking of women, and now women suddenly having value that they did not have before. Goes, if they start fighting on Lumpinee or whatever, it's going to be even more the case. We've heard stories that the Lumpinee, we've heard various versions, the Lumpinee for women promoters who book female fighters. You don't know where I'm going with
No.
this? And the Channel 8,
Oh, yeah.
the Channel 8 promoters that book female fighters are creating turf. We can't
We don't know which
do not
side it's
say definitively what's happening.
We don't know which side it is.
But we've heard said that if you fight on one promotion, you can't fight on the other promotion. I don't even know if this is a single case or it's something that's developing, but this is female fighters. And this is what's so kind of weirdly cool. We're like, why are there no Raja Damnern and Lumpinee champions, simultaneous champions in the 1990s in the golden age of Muay Thai? Or very, very few. Yokampan, one of the very few. Why
Oh, no, not at
not
the same
simultaneous?
time.
But even then,
Yeah.
you tended to be a Lumpinee champion or a Raja champion.
Because of promoters, yeah.
It's because it was highly turfed.
Yeah.
You, as a fighter, were shaped and modeled through your gym's connections to a specific promoter who represented a specific stadium. So if you became the 118-pound champion at Lumpinee, there's no way you're going to fight at Raja. The only reason why Yokampan became Lumpinee and Raja champions simultaneously is his contract got sold, and he moved from a Lumpinee promoter to a Raja, and he hadn't lost his belt yet, so he went and fought and got both. Those fighters were highly controlled.
Yes.
A fighter.
I think of Pootpad Noi. Like, Pootpad Noi, when he retired, he was like, I just wanted
One of the greats
any
ever.
kind of freedom. He was like, he was talking about how every piece of his life was controlled, and I said, oh, it's like being a soldier, and he said it was worse than being a soldier. That's the John Wayne Parr, you are going to the hell. We're like, oh, I want to be treated like a Thai, and it's like, you don't want to fucking go to a completely controlled, regimented life. Like, he wanted out of it so hard.
Pootpad Noi?
Yeah.
And so many. And also, why, like, let's say a very good fighter like Karhat, why did Karhat have to go fight monsters at 122 instead of...
He's a 115 fighter.
He was a 115 fighter.
Yeah.
Because he had no choice who was fighting.
Yeah.
Why we asked, I think it was Chomung Pat, we asked about Panam Tumlek. Why did Panam Tumlek, who was like 118-pound fighter, have to face Samart, who's a 126-pound fighter, in Samart's return, and he fucking got knocked the shit out? The answer was simple: promoter.
Yeah.
Like, you go do this.
Yeah.
There's no, okay, and back then it was mafia,
Yeah.
so you're like, you might be killed. You had gambling debts, like it was fucking serious stuff. But we romanticize these eras and these situations, but there's actually really strong power struggles that have heavy consequences.
Yeah.
And when we hear the rumor that if you fight for the women at Lumpinee as a woman, or you fight on Channel 8, there's a split.
Yeah.
There could be a split.
Like pick a side, basically.
Pick a side that oh, we're running out on this. That is real Muay Thai.
Yeah, it's shitty, but it's real Muay Thai.
But the shitty goes with all the things you glorify.
Totally.
Let's wait 1 second. Let's keep going. And to continue, if women start, as with our last thing, start fighting regularly at Lumpinee Stadium, and Channel 8 fights keep building on female stars, there's going to be a shortage of female fighters. You're going to have to pick a side. They're going to start competing over which fighter. Like Dong Kong Fa, we don't know this for a fact, but Dong Kong Fa, who's a Channel 8 star, was supposed to fight for the WBC belt versus Suris
At Lumpinee.
at Lumpinee Stadium. We think, it was rumored, strongly rumored that this was going to happen.
Yeah. That was the goal.
Yeah, that was the goal, but Dong Kong Fa might not have agreed to it.
Right.
So there was this thing, but she's a Channel 8 star.
Yeah.
So maybe that's not even possible in the future, that promotional turf is going to drive a wedge in female fighting, which comes from the fact that now women are having value.
Yes, but there are way more women fighting in Thailand now than even when we got here 9 years ago.
Totally.
And with the visibility of women fighting on these shows in the same way that men came and were like, I want to be on Max, there are women right now in their home countries who are like, I want to go fight on
when
Channel
I say a shortage, I mean because of COVID.
Yes,
There will be
more.
There's going to be a lot of females
it's
fighting
the
in the
same
next 3 or 4 years.
When I ask, two amazing legends, I'm like, did you ever fight this one? Why didn't you ever fight that one? And they're like, oh, we're different promoters. Like, we never fought because it's different
There'd
promoters.
be no chance of it.
Yeah.
But this is the monkey's paw. You could find yourself pigeonholed in an area where you don't even realize you're pigeonholed. I was thinking to myself that if you're a prominent female fighter in a gym and there's some kind of turf struggle over you, promoters could also leverage the other fighters in the gym. Like, I know you don't think this is real.
No, I don't know what you're talking about.
But it's like, let's say you're a female fighter for a gym that has Thais and Farang, right? And you want to fight on Channel 8. The Lumpinee promoter could be like, oh, go ahead, fight on Channel 8. None of your gym is going to fight in Lumpinee.
Oh, no, yeah,
like, not even the men, not even the Thais. Like, who knows this is how pressures work.
Like, you're all blacklisted. Yep.
You can get blacklisted from promotions really easily in Thailand.
Yeah.
All that it takes is for there to be perceived value, whether it's economic value, like money being made, or reputational value, cultural capital, that as women start to get value, all the hidden mechanisms of value control in the culture that you cannot say. We've been here a long time, you're fluent in Thai, you have tight relationships with Thais, you can't even see them. We get blindsided by them. These mechanisms of control are going to become more prevalent because there's increased value. But I feel like I lost you on this.
I'm thinking about something else that's to me related.
Well, go for it. I want to hear.
I don't think you did. It's not related.
I thought you said to me related.
This is a
podcast. Go for it, baby.
The world changes all the time. Like, things change all the time, and they can be really drastic. Like, they can have, like, things just do not function the same way that they ever have before. in the way that we were talking about how the newsletter comes about, where like I'm scrolling through stuff and I see something, I'm like, oh, Kevin, this is really interesting, and I like translate. I think within 2 days of having seen this post of the head of this gym complaining that Westerners are not being controlled legally,
regulated,
basically that gyms need protections now that Westerners are so integrated into the value of gyms, I saw another post by a different gym. And this is the head of the Giet Kam Torn gym, which is also called Annie Muay Thai. So this is an interesting thing where
Really?
like multiple gyms will be within one space.
I didn't know they have a Farang name.
It's not a Farang name.
Annie?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's A-N-N-Y. It's not the
okay.
name Annie.
I didn't know. Okay.
They have a huge fighter right now. His name is Kong Klai. He was Omnoi Stadium champion. He became a Suzu Stadium champion. He's on Thai Fight now. There's a feeder system that when you become a Suzu champion, now you basically get fed into Thai Fight. This is what happened with PTT. This is now Kong Klai. He's pretty amazing knee fighter, but he's very young. It's like 20 or something. The head of this gym, who we've met, he's police, I think.
Remember that?
He's a very dignified, he has a lot of power. I'm not in Thai, like he's got like authority and influence. He posted quite a long thing that was saying, if you want to book my fighter, the correct way to do Muay Thai manners, or what would you call it, custom? The custom of Muay Thai dealings is you talk to me. He's like, you contact me if you want my fighter to do anything. Which means, and none of this was written, but which means someone contacted his fighter directly through his Facebook page and was like, we want you to fight on whatever. Do you want to do this?
Facebook page.
Doesn't matter. There was no social media when Diesel Noy and Karahat and whoever, or even when like, 2000 in Thailand, there wasn't social media that a fighter would be on probably 10 years ago because people didn't have phones or access or whatever this thing is. Now everyone has a computer in their pocket with direct access, so you can actually contact that fighter. It's so easy. What he's talking about is this threat of like stealing a fighter, of like siphoning a fighter. And he's like, you are not going according to Thai custom, Muay Thai custom, which is you go through the head of the gym. You want anything to do with this?
And he says it's because I took on the expense.
He said he was talking about how his wife cooks. He's like, my wife is feeding all of our fighters, and you don't have the respect to like go top down.
And a lot of times when these things are talked about, the first Farang comment is exploitation, blah, 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 right?
Save Bukau, or like free Bukau, or whatever.
Yeah, that was a very famous case of him trying to get out of an onerous contract.
Yeah.
But you also have to keep in mind is that these social structures are modeled on the Thai traditional family. The gym owner is the father of the family.
Huge.
The wife is the mother of the family, cooks for the family. And basically what broadly happens is a gym adopts a bunch of boys, like a class of boys, 10 boys or whatever, feeds them, raises them together, trains them against each other, with the hope that one of my seeds that I've planted will become a star, and maybe two will become like a medium star. And from the proceeds of our bet on these boys and our knowledge of how to build a fighter in a group of family, like a family, it's a fucking family, we will get by, or we will get prestige, or we will maybe hit it big.
If you think of any gym, including Golden Age, Silver Age, whatever, who had more than like 2 big name champions, they were purchased.
Probably.
You don't create 5 champions, 2 champions.
Yeah, I wonder.
Like Sorplunget bought their fighters, but they bought them young.
You think Sit Yotong bought all theirs?
Well,
I don't know.
they came to him young, and he like brought them, but it was like you were already really strong where you were, and came
Maybe
in.
we don't want to say we don't know.
Like, he had so many people come through his gym.
Yeah, and the Pormong Pet, like I don't know. There might be, in the past, there might have been gyms that were really good at taking like moderately developed boys instead of stars.
Yes.
And moving you, like when you come to my gym at like 13 or 15, I can push you up to greatness or something like that.
And they have the connections to make that possible.
Totally, and that's kind of what happens. But we have to understand that this business model is really a family model. It's modeled on a family, And yes, there's plenty of exploitation and abuse and things that you can definitely criticize from a Western perspective, but this is really the knitting of a family. And this is actually the thing that is eroding in the big wide picture of Muay Thai in Thailand, is that you are the loss of these smaller family gyms, of which there were thousands, creating these mini champions, local champions, out of families of boys adopted that would then feed the Lumpinee ring. There's an entire ecosystem that's not seen that is eroding and disappearing. And now you have mega gyms just pulling the top talent
Yes.
prematurely. It's almost like picking the fruit, all the fruit, and putting it in a marketplace or something.
Yeah.
And you're not like taking care of the orchard
Yeah.
in a weird way. But this is the crazy thing, is we are, as Westerners, entering into these networks, and we can't even see the customs by which they stick together themselves. Oh, what was I going to say? There's something else that was very interesting. Oh, you were talking about that Kiatcom Torn case. What was he? He was talking about like a one fight or something that you were guessing.
No,
you didn't say.
It was just that you would never contact
Oh.
the fighter directly.
I know what I want to say. So, just as a bit of like self-explanation and confession, this is one reason why Sylvie has steered away from big promotional movements in the country. Because if you start fighting in a certain network, you become bound. You can become bound to that network. We have to be, it's one reason why you don't want to fight 3-round fights anyways. We tell everyone you're not fighting 3-round fights.
They find it so funny.
Because they think it's easy to fight 3.
It's more money and it's easier.
It's like less work. Yeah. But there is this sense of also like being very wary of the larger invisible shapes of control.
Yeah.
And if there is going to be a power struggle between Lumpinee Female Promotion and Channel 8, that's like something like we just don't want any. These are big boys.
No, thank you.
This is like not going to be good for anyone.
Yeah.
But if you go to a gym that has Channel 8 connections, that might be really good for you. You train at the gym, and for you fighting on these kind of 3-round entertainment shows, it gives you exposure. You get great experience. That might be a really this is not all bad, but it's like that. I don't know. For us, there's a kind of like ambition. I come back to, we came all the way to Thailand to fight in traditional Muay Thai. And traditional Muay Thai is being pressured to change in a big way. And it feels sad. One reason we're doing the Muay Thai Library is to archive, because it all might get changed and radically lost.
Yeah.
And so fighting under traditional rules seems like the least one could do to keep lending one's name and reputation to a way of fighting. And that joining these other promotions and being defined by them, being known by them, lends credence to this other movement within Muay Thai, which has produced many good things, many good opportunities. But it's like, we live in a very special time. It's so amazing, the time we've been here 9 years, female Muay Thai has changed so much while we've been here. And it wasn't changing a lot before we got here. And it's like we're living through, it's like that Chinese curse, may you live through interesting times. I never heard that.
It's like, that goes both ways. I do want to talk about this gambling thing that I was thinking of, because it actually links into two elements of what we're talking about.
Let's go for it, baby.
So I ran into Sifu. If you guys don't know who Sifu is, Sifu McGinnis has been in Thailand since the Golden Age. He was really close with Ajahn Tue, who is Yod Tong. He's the head of Sid Yod Tong. They traveled to Bangkok together, did all these things together.
Sillotong made some art, maybe the GOAT and Kong Tor Ni and so many countless champions. So this is like the biggest gym of the golden age.
Produced the most champions.
Yeah.
Nongki Paiute is number 2. So I ran into Sifu, I was talking to Sifu, and we're kind of talking about the Lumpinee situation and things like this. He's in the Muay Thai Library. You can go see Sifu in the Muay Thai Library.
And he was an incredible innovator because in the 90s, and I don't know if it was 2000s, the integration of Westerners into Thailand he was like one of the first.
He's the only Westerner to ever be a referee at Lumpinee
Stadium
for a show.
For a real Lumpinee fight.
And I think he promoted there as well.
I think he was.
Yeah.
But he was like, he just a total pioneer.
Yes.
They didn't like put on a fake fight so the Westerner could be the referee. It was like an actual Muay Thai fight, like between legends, I think.
I don't remember who it was.
Cherry or something?
Cherry and someone.
Yeah.
Maybe Cherry and Nampon, they fought so many times. Anyway, he was talking about a different time. He was talking about his time, which is like the golden age. And something that I found really brilliant about what he was saying is that I've had this like nagging thought for quite a long time. Kevin and I talk about how do you save Muay Thai. We have to save jazz and we have to save Latin.
Yeah.
So how do you save Muay Thai? And part of the problem is that when Muay Thai is just not as popular among Thais watching it anymore as the way that it used to be. So the only people watching it are gamblers. So part of this like gambling is ruining it, is that they are the only ones keeping it alive. Whereas before it was gamblers, and then there were also people who would fill the stadia to just watch Muay Thai. And that doesn't happen as much anymore. So I think part of why Muay Thai is not as popular anymore is that back in the day, it seemed like where a fighter was from mattered a lot. You knew which fighters were from Khon Kaen. You identified with the fighters from the South. I know every Southern fighter, like it's important that they're from the South. Chachern Sao, which is right above Bangkok, just like dealing out legends. It's crazy. I don't know why they're so strong, but they're amazing. So you knew where people were from. What Sifu said to me totally corroborated this feeling that I had, because now you don't know where people are from because they basically get transplanted to whatever gym they're out of. And again, fighters get bought now more than they used to. So like you have no idea where PK Sanchai fighters are from. They're just from PK Sanchai. And what he was talking about is that back in the day when you had like your little local champion, there was one TV in the whole area. Sidiotong is like at the far end of Pattaya. They would have people from all over Pattaya go to Sidiotong on fight nights to watch on the one TV that was in that area, and they would all gamble there in front of the screen while there was also gambling going on at Lumpinee that maybe they had like a little bit of stake in. But so there's like two things going on. When they're all gambling in front of the TV, when they make their money, there was like a kind of social rule that they would put 10% of whatever they won into a pot, and that would go to the trainer of and the fighter of whoever was fighting. So as a trainer of a star, you used to make a lot of money. Trainers used to actually get back on their investment if they were training a fighter who was really strong through gambling. They're not making that money on the kadua, they're making that money on gambling. And then the village or the people who have their star, I'm from Khon Kaen, Karahat's fighting, I'm gonna gamble on it. The village is actually making money itself off of your fighter being a star. So the like traditional term champion, to be a champion, you are fighting for someone. You represent someone. So these are the people's champion, and they're actually making money and like
for your village. For
the village.
When you won a fight, your whole village won money.
But we saw this in small, like the way that Kevin is saying that real Muay Thai still exists in the provinces. That still happens in the provinces. When we first came down to Pattaya and Petji Ja was a star, she didn't fight in Pattaya. She couldn't fight in Pattaya. There was nobody to fight. But the entire neighborhood would pool money together when she would go to fight and put it on a side bet.
Was that a side bet?
Yeah, when we went to Surin with them. So the whole neighborhood is potentially profiting.
Yeah.
It sucks too, because if you lose, then your whole neighborhood loses money, but you're in it together.
But this is actually a beautiful thing,
Well, you have this whole thing about the loser as a champion.
Well, yeah, but this is the beautiful thing, is that when you win under those conditions, what it takes to be victorious, where two people are fighting for the not only the honor, but actual the economic wealth of a community, and maybe winning a bet could make a difference in a month's salary or something. To win under those conditions is just, it takes something special.
Yes.
Even if you're a fucking 12-year-old.
Yes.
Like,
and there's pride
this
in it.
is why Dong Kong Fa is such a fucking amazing, but not technically precise fighter, is she fought in the festival fights, and she learned to fight as a prize fighter. It's not just a prize money for your family, it's everyone.
Yes, but this is also why I don't want to get in, it's a whole separate subject, but the thing about children fighting, people get so enraged about it, and the thing that is very difficult to understand from the actual Thai history standpoint, tradition of children fighting, is that you are this field of merit. You are actually
explain field of merit.
You are actually supporting your parents, your own education. Yodkun Pan talks about this all the time. He's like, you had to fight to pay to go to school. Like, this was, if you wanted to go to school, you had to fight. And then by extension, your entire area, like your entire village.
Well, the more famous you became, the wider the circle of people who would bet on you.
Well,
so maybe it started like 2 blocks around the gym,
right.
And then as you won, it could be the whole city.
But if you want a very good example of this, watch Todd Kelstein's Buffalo Girls. It's got Stamp when she's 8 years old, and she fights this side bet with Pet. And Stamp was able to fight and win with side bets enough to actually help her family buy a house. This is a huge thing. Now Stamp's on 1 and is probably like one of the highest paid female fighters ever, so it's like that amplified. But it's not local anymore the way that it was when she was little. It's just her family, like with.
We don't know, but yeah,
I don't know,
yeah,
but
we're
that's
making
how it
stuff
goes.
up, yeah.
But the way that gambling has become more centralized now, and it's not necessarily the provinces watching on the TV and all of this stuff, and you don't know where fighters are from, and they're all from these big gyms, and trainers aren't making money directly off their fighters.
And now people are betting online, like part of the problem with these big
it's become
gambling.
more like, am I making money or not, rather than like this whole kind of people's champion thing. But wait, but so this is one of the reasons why we say over and over and over again, you cannot divorce gambling from Muay Thai. It's like it's been so much a part of it that it's very hard to separate it.
Yeah.
But here's an interesting thing. For the longest time, female Muay Thai, like in Bangkok, not festival, like, what do you call it? Female Muay Thai out in the provinces, because there's gambling, strong, like super strong female fighting out in the provinces because of the gambling. There wasn't gambling on female Muay Thai in Bangkok on these shows, these kind of like where women had a place to fight on the Queen's birthday or whatever the thing is. Visible female Muay Thai in Bangkok, whatever, Channel 8, whatever, people don't gamble on 3-round fights generally. It's not a gambling thing. Yeah. So the lack of gambling in female Muay Thai and the lack of gambling in 3-round fights created this like, oh, these can kind of rise together, these can go together. And so now Lumpinee being like, no more Muay Thai. Sorry.
That was a
Freudian slip.
Freudian slip. Thank you, Freud.
No, I meant one thing and said my mother. The lack of gambling actually is yet another, like, let's feed this current of female Muay Thai, because the no gambling and female Muay Thai kind of come together. They kind of go together. So this 3-round fight, female Muay Thai, no gambling, goes in the same pocket.
But I want to get back to, because you rode right over it, field of merit.
Okay.
Because this is the thing that's being lost.
Yeah, we've written about this, but you have to talk about it.
Where it's a podcast, we're not gonna like go
look at my writing.
Because I have to go find that article, and I don't want to go do that. I know I wrote about it. Sylvie has like
and then it turns out I
1,500 articles she's written. Like, unbelievable. One day this will be recognized as a great body of work.
Find the one where I talk about where it's complicated to be a woman in a male-dominated
Totally. But this is the thing that's being lost that's kind of interesting, is that this financial web of betting with small bets.
Yeah, it's like
Remember
200
Chicken
baht.
Ben didn't even bet on his son?
Yeah, because he was afraid he wouldn't have heart. He's afraid.
But other people in the family bet on him.
Totally. I think his uncle made money. Yeah.
We laugh about that, but that boy is going to be, that's something he grows up as a boy.
Well, he doesn't know that yet.
Yeah.
Just don't tell him.
But this is the thing. Sylvie described the financial web of investment, of pitching in, and it starts among family members and grows into a small community, and it can grow into represent an entire city, and that the fighter, when they get to the big fight, are basically representing the wealth and providence of their community. This financial thing mirrors a spiritual thing, which is, in Buddhism, the field of merit. You, by being a good person, following the precepts, and in many ways, a fighter who fights well is seen as following the precepts of Muay Thai, of Buddhism.
And ideals of masculinity for male fighters are the same as for Buddhist monks. So there is a direct...
There is a layering of that this... Like when you come out of the ring in the festival fights and you won your fight, what do people do?
They all touch
They
me.
touch you.
I don't love it.
Because you have...
It's like luck.
You have luck or but charm. But this is a spiritual thing. It's not just superstition. It is when someone succeeds in what they're doing, you can only really succeed generally if you're following the precepts of goodness, right? And so underneath the web of gambling is also a web of spirituality that nobody's thinking about it. They're just like, oh, you won, I want some of that. But it's a web. Every fighter is a web. And so the demise of the local champion and the
displacement of the local champion. as well,
that entire web is being like pulled at. And underneath it is also the spiritual connectivity of people who share food or share a town.
Yeah.
Like this is that when you're trying to wipe out gambling, and we understand now gambling is done online with very big kind of like gambling powers, and the web of connection is not the same as it used to be, maybe. And the fighters are no longer attached to their historic places and the styles of those gyms. When you try to wipe out gambling, you're cutting at the very roots of Muay Thai.
There's a thing, if you like, this is totally just an anecdotal, but I find it very expressive of what we're talking about. If you go to like a Duuglas-Ittu, this is like an IT place where there are kiosks everywhere. So like everyone sells the same things.
Well, like cell phones.
Like literally the same
stuff. Yeah.
In two separate kiosks, and they're mainly the same price. Like if this person doesn't have the cord you asked for, they'll actually go get it from this person and sell it to you. It's very strange. But when you buy something, so say I'm buying like a power cord, something maybe a little more significant than that, something that's like 1,000 baht. They sell it to me, I hand them the money, they have this case that's got all the stuff that they sell in it. They'll take that money, the actual bill, and they'll tap it on all their merchandise. That's like putting this luck of the sale on all the merchandise. It's like now all of you will be sold as well.
And
you can't do that if I pay with my Venmo.
That's true.
Like
maybe they wave the phone over it.
It just takes out the.
But this thing is the connectivity.
Yeah.
Which is what we're kind of talking about. What do you think?
We're out of time on that one. You got to restart it if you want to start.
Oh shit.
Subject.
Something.
In summary.
I think that is being left in. That is being left in. That is, matter of fact, that might become like a little audio clip that starts every Muay Thai Bones. Because people don't know actually how funny you are.
I'm not funny.
You're very funny. Okay, so thank you everyone for, I don't even know what that was. We're so crazy.
You guys always want like a Buddhist teaching. Auton means to like endure.
Yeah, we've done that
If you
one.
have auton through.
Yeah, if you had
this-
endured this Muay Thai Bones. Part of it is that we haven't done one for so long, so it just kind of like builds up. Part of it is that like without Sylvie being able to fight and even train regularly in like something, it's just like things are difficult in a way that's not, you can't blame it on something.
Yeah.
But what you got there in this Muay Thai Bones was this kind of like rock
That was
in
the
the throat.
concentrated version. Add water.
Yeah, exactly. That is just like, and I feel like we still didn't really get at fully what that was, what Lumpinee fighting at
Jesus.
women is.
If this actually happens this weekend, there'll be a whole other thing to be like, how did this?
Well, how
shape
does
up?
it flow out? Then it'll be the first 5-round traditional rules fight at
Hopefully,
Lumpinee, which will be
yeah.
the next one after
Hopefully.
this. Maybe there'll be a Lumpinee belt added to this, or whatever. This is starting to unfold. Or, as sometimes happens, there's this effort of innovation and it just crumbles,
Yeah.
and we don't know which one it is.
Yeah.
But the topic is so loaded, like it's almost like it's painful to talk about it, even for me.
Yeah.
The way you look at me funny.
For sure.
So anyways, you went through the Lumpinee, Women in Lumpinee edition. How do we end this?
Fade out.
No.
1970s, just fade out.
70s music. But thank you for supporting us and listening to our podcast. We always say we want to do another one soon, and I fucking want to do another one soon.
But we need to nap first for like 5 days.
But if you're watching on YouTube, you can, as only $1 patron, you can get all of our Muay Thai Bones podcasts as an audio subscription under however you listen to your podcast. And if you're listening on as a patron, you can hop over to YouTube and watch us sit around.
Watch us change locations 3 times because the sun was on.
Totally. So check out our Muay Thai Bones newsletter, which we'll put a link into that.
It's not on a like every whatever schedule. It's when we've collected enough to make it
To fill it up.
full. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been around every 2 or 3 weeks. And then also check out the shirts and shorts that we've been making for the Legends. The money that moves through that is fucking awesome.
Yes.
Every time we send, and when you buy a shirt within a week, the money is right in there
Yep.
or shorter. And it's always appreciated and feels special every time.
And is necessary at certain stretches as well.
Totally. So, cue music.
Dun, 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 dun.
Dun-dun-dun.
Meow, meow, meow.
That's very good.